Hey guys, tonight we're going back in time, way back to the early 1900s, when you lived in someone else's mansion, worked 16-hour days, and your life depended on getting a roast dinner out without a single spot of gravy on the silver tray. We're talking about what it was like to be a servant in an Edwardian household. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this, but that's okay, because you're going to live it anyway, step by exhausting, coal-dusted step. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I mean, I'll still be whispering about chamber pots and silver polishing, but it's nice to know you're along for the ride. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. I always imagine some of you curled up in little pockets of the world, listening from Edinburgh, or Kansas City or Tokyo at 2:43 AM. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake before the world, not just early, Edwardian early, as in 4:30 AM in the pitch dark in a freezing little attic room, where your blanket is as thin as the excuse the upstairs maid gave yesterday for being late to tea service. The coals in your fireplace are cold. You stretch your feet out to feel for warmth and your toes bump against your iron chamber pot instead. Lucky you. You get up without sighing. You've learned not to sigh. The floor creaks, and every creak means something when you live below stairs. You splash water from the jug onto your face, cold enough to make your eyes sting, and throw on your uniform in ractus silence. Hair pinned up tight, apron smooth, collar buttoned, no mirror needed. You know what you look like? Invisible. First stop is the kitchen range. The cook hasn't arrived yet. She gets up at 500 but it's your job to make sure the stove is lit before she stomps down the stairs, still in her slippers, demanding hot water for her tea. You grab the coal scuttle, which is always heavier than you expect, and you make your way down the corridor. The kitchen is cold, the stone floor like winter pressed against your soles. You light the kindling, coax the flame, and feed the stove its first pieces of coal like you're appeasing a hungry beast. If the fire goes out, start over, again and again until it stays lit. You don't get to rest, though. Once that fire is going, it's time to move on to the fireplaces in the drawing room, the morning room, the master's bedroom. All must be burning merrily by the time the family wakes, as if the house simply wants to be warm for them. You carry the ashes out back in a metal bucket, hoping not to spill any on your skirt. If you do, you'll need to stop and clean yourself up, and there's no time for that. By 6 AM, the house is starting to stir. You hear the rustle of sheets, the creak of upstairs floorboards. That means the bellboard will start soon. Little bells connected to every important room in the house, and each with its own sound and tiny brass label. When it rings, you run, but right now you get a moment, just a sliver of one, to eat a piece of bread and maybe sip a bit of weak tea. The rest of the servants are trickling in. The hall boy, who's 12 and already has bags under his eyes. The under-housemaid, wiping her nose on her sleeve. No one says much. You're all too tired. You remember when you first came to this house? You thought it might be exciting, romantic even, like the stories in those penny novels, where a kitchen maid catches the eye of a nobleman. But mostly it's cold feet, sore hands, and learning to disappear behind doors before they open. By 6:30, you're carrying hot water to the bedrooms upstairs, balancing porcelain jugs on trays, careful not to slosh a single drop. If the water cools before the lady uses it, you'll hear about it. And if you trip on the runner carpet and spill something on the hallway rug, heaven help you. Those rugs cost more than your yearly wages. One of the jugs you carry is chipped. You know this, and so does Mrs. Phelps, the housekeeper. She's waiting to see if you'll make the mistake of delivering it to the master's room. You don't. You hand that one off to the scullery maid, who's still too new to know better. Sometimes survival is just knowing what not to carry. Historical fact, in Edwardian England it wasn't unusual for large households to employ 15 or more servants, each with a strictly defined role. And yet most people living in Britain during this time were servants or working-class labourers. The glittering country homes were powered by human exhaustion. Quirky fact, the bellboards had their own sort of language. Some maids claimed they could tell which family member had rung just by the rhythm or urgency of the bell. A sharp double ring, that's the lady's maid summoning you to dress her. A lazy single ding, probably the youngest daughter wanting someone to find her gloves. There's debate among historians about just how willingly most servants stayed in service. Some argue it was a chosen stable career, especially for women offering shelter and food. Others insist that, given the chance, Many would have left in a heartbeat for factory work or clerical jobs. What's certain is that the job chose you more often than the other way around. If your mother was a cook, your path was likely already set. By 7 km, the rest of the house is waking, but you're already 3 hours into your day, and you haven't even polished the silver yet. You don't use the main staircase, that's not for you. You use the narrow, creaking, steep-as-sin servants' stairs tucked into corners of the house like afterthoughts. There's one behind the butler's pantry, another hidden beside the library. They're barely wide enough for your shoulders and impossible to navigate in silence, but you've learned to move like a ghost, quick, efficient, quiet. This is your world, the Backstairs world, where your rank determines everything from when you eat to who you're allowed to speak to. You've only been here a year, but even now, the ladder of servant hierarchy is etched into your brain like scripture. At the top sits the butler, of course. He's tall, composed, with a face that hasn't smiled since Queen Victoria died. Then comes the housekeeper, Mrs. Phelps. She's half terrifying, half impressively upright. They run the house like a dual monarchy. You report to someone much lower down, a senior housemaid who only just started speaking to you in full sentences. The divisions below stairs are sharp, not just between genders, but within your own kind. The lady's maid and the valet, personal servants to the family, are near untouchable. They get better food, more privacy, and more contempt from the rest of you. Their job is to cater to individual whims, lace gloves, cologne, secret letters, and they hear things you'll never be allowed to repeat. Then you've got the upper maids, the footmen, and below them, people like you. Housemaids, scullery maids, hall boys, human wallpaper. You're not allowed to eat with the higher ranks. Meals in the servants' hall are staggered. If you enter too early or sit in the wrong chair, someone will wordlessly put their cup down and look at you until you vanish. You once made the mistake of sitting before the second footman had finished his tea. Never again. Sometimes you wonder how the family sees you, or if they see you. There's a strange etiquette around it. Some masters never speak directly to the servants, choosing instead to communicate through their butler or maid. You could be in the same room for 10 minutes and not hear your own name. If they do speak, it's usually a directive, as if you were part of the wallpaper that had suddenly decided to move. You clean rooms you're never meant to admire. You polish marble fireplaces while standing on rugs worth more than your year's wages. You dust bookcases full of titles you've never been allowed to read. It's a strange, constant dance between proximity and distance. The family might be just feet away, laughing about dinner parties or country outings, while you crouch beneath a table polishing the legs so they can rest their boots in style. Still, you learn. You hear accents from Eton, France, and somewhere in Italy that one of the guests thinks is charming. You pick up snippets of gossip and politics, usually muttered over cigars and cognac. None of it is meant for you, but knowledge leaks, and sometimes it changes you. You start to imagine things, different lives, different cities, perhaps even different yous, but mostly you work. Today the footmen are unloading new trunks, the family's cousins are arriving for a visit, which means more fires, more linens, and at least one guest who will assume you don't understand English. One of them, a colonel something or other, once mistook the butler for the estate owner and you for a statue. You held perfectly still until he walked away, never correcting him. There's a bell code system that you're still mastering. 3 short rings from the drawing room, tea, 2 from the blue bedroom, hot water, an aggressive 4 in a row. That's a problem. Either a guest is unhappy or someone upstairs has broken something valuable and wants it cleaned before anyone else notices. You learn to distinguish them by tone. The bells don't just ring, they speak. Historical fact. Edwardian households, especially among the upper classes, had finely tuned servant hierarchies that rivaled military structures. A first footman could earn nearly double the salary of a housemaid, and job roles were highly gendered and specific. Crossing those lines wasn't just unusual, it was scandalous. Quirky fact. Some large houses were built with deliberately confusing corridors to keep servants out of sight. There were even silent floor coverings in certain passageways, like cork or thick carpet, so the family's footsteps would never be disturbed by the clatter of servant shoes. There's a quiet argument among historians about just how much power the servants truly had. Yes, they lived hard lives, but many knew every secret of the families they served. Some wielded soft influence, subtly guiding decisions, bending household routines to their will. Others argue that this is romanticizing powerlessness, that knowing secrets doesn't mean having freedom. The truth might be somewhere in between. Your task for the morning is to prepare the guest bedrooms. That means heating bricks for foot warmers, fluffing pillows, and making sure no corners are creased in the bed linen. The beds must look untouched, yet inviting. You place a sprig of lavender on the pillow of the blue room. No one told you to do that. It just feels right. You carry a vase of fresh flowers up the backstairs, careful not to spill a drop of water on the carpet runner. You pass the second footman on the landing. He nods slightly, which feels like a compliment. Or maybe it's pity. Either way, you don't stop to ask. Sometimes you think of your life as two different buildings. There's the house above, glittering with chandeliers and polished mahogany. And then there's your world below. Dim corridors, coal buckets, whispered warnings, and a constant dance to remain invisible but indispensable. You are the hands that keep the house breathing, and no one is supposed to notice. It starts with a single chime, then another, then 5 at once, like a manic church service played out in brass and wire. You're in the scullery, elbow deep in yesterday's pudding dish, when the bellboard comes alive. Each bell has its own tone, some crisp, some lazy, some already giving you a headache before you even see which room is calling. The little black needle beneath each bell jumps wildly, pointing to the room where some aristocratic need has just erupted. This is your command centre. No higher servant would dream of dealing with it directly. This is your battlefield, and the board is your general. You wipe your hands on your apron, scan the board, and try to triage the chaos. Drawing room, probably tea. Morning room, the lady's maid might need assistance. Upstairs bedroom, someone's misplaced a brooch or needs help buttoning a boot. You prioritise fast and move faster. The bell system is a marvel of twisted wire and Victorian paranoia. Installed discreetly behind the walls, each room has a pull cord or button. Yank it, and the bell rings downstairs, vibrating just enough to ruin your concentration. You once heard of a grand estate with over 60 bells, each more dramatic than the last. One even had a custom chime because the lady of the house thought her requests deserved a special sound. You grab your tray and move. The bell from the breakfast room is rung 3 times in a row. That's either a real emergency or someone who doesn't know how to be ignored politely. You rush up the back stairs, careful to keep your shoes quiet. You straighten your apron as you go, practicing your blank expression. The right look is half serene, half blank. Present, but never really present. When you arrive, the request is exactly what you expected, and still somehow absurd. The mistress would like a different jam. The raspberry has too many seeds. Could you fetch the gooseberry instead? Of course you can. You smile, nod, back out of the room, and mentally curse every berry in England. You rush down again, then find the jam, and are halfway back up when the bell rings again, this time from the master's dressing room. You pivot, gooseberry in hand, and deliver both jam and dignity with a perfectly neutral nod. You're thanked with silence. In the hall outside, you nearly run into the under-footman, whose face looks flushed. He got summoned 3 times in 10 minutes, once just to reposition a chair 2 inches to the left. He mutters something about madness, and you offer a brief smile of shared misery before hurrying back down. The bells haven't stopped. They never really do. There's a rhythm to answering them, almost like a dance. Quick steps, sharp turns, mental notes. You develop instincts. Which bells can wait? Which ones will result in your name being passed to Mrs. Phelps? The drawing room bell is demanding but rarely urgent. The library bell is almost always the master needing a book he can't find but won't describe. That blue one about France, he once said. It turned out to be a red book on Italy. Historical fact. In many Edwardian homes, the bellboard was a central part of the household's operation. Some were so complex that the butler or housekeeper kept logs to track servant response times. Getting to a room too slowly could mean a demotion or worse, being labelled lazy, which was as good as being branded. Quirky fact, servants sometimes develop secret codes or systems of their own, placing a teacup in a certain spot, folding a napkin a particular way, to indicate if a guest was especially difficult or if a room contained something scandalous. One maid reportedly used a spoon turned handle out to warn others that a visitor had wandering hands. Debate among scholars continues over just how much surveillance the bell system created. Was it about convenience or control? Some historians see it as the ultimate in labour management, instant, impersonal, relentless. Others argue that it was merely a necessity in huge homes, where yelling for a servant would have been uncivilised. Whatever the intent, the effect was the same. You were on call, always, like a human alarm system with no snooze button. By mid-morning, the bellboard slows, if only for a minute. You take the opportunity to mop the scullery floor, sweep under the sideboards, and reset the pantry. You're humming quietly some tune your grandmother used to sing when a sudden ring makes you jump. The dining room. You blink. It's not mealtime, that's unusual. You answer, and the butler is waiting. He wants everything in perfect order for a luncheon that was only just planned. 12 guests, short notice, and a full table setting expected. That means the good silver, the crystal glasses, the monogram napkins that take you 20 minutes each to fold just right. Your fingers already ache just thinking about it. Back in the butler's pantry, you begin to polish. Silver trays, forks, knives, soup spoons, oyster forks, which no one actually uses, and grape shears, which someone will. Each piece must be spotless. Your own face faintly visible in the reflection. There are over 120 pieces to prepare. And the kicker? You won't even get to eat from them. Your lunch will be cold meat and yesterday's bread in the servants' hall, and if you're lucky, a lukewarm cup of tea. As you work, the bells continue their chatter. You start to feel them even when they're silent, like phantom rings in your ears. Every clink of silver, every footstep overhead is another potential summons. You wonder what it's like to live on the other side of the wire, to pull a bell and have someone appear, smiling, holding jam. You find yourself fantasizing, not about wealth, but about stillness. A room where no bells ring, where no one speaks your name like it's a command, just silence. A bed that doesn't feel like a drawer, a day that doesn't begin in darkness. Then the bell from the upstairs corridor rings again, and you're off, like always, like clockwork. You can always tell what time it is by the smells. Around 8, the kitchen reeks of burning toast and bacon grease. By 10, the heavy scent of boiled meats and root vegetables creeps up the stairs and into your lungs. But by noon, there's a change, a sort of freshness, a powdery sweetness in the air. That means the ladies are dressing and your part in that ritual is about to begin. Today you're assisting Miss Eliza, the youngest daughter of the house. She's 20, which means she's mastered the art of being bored with everything. You've laid out her walking gown already, a crisp lavender ensemble with white lace at the collar and matching gloves. You ironed the gloves yourself this morning, pressing them flat and wrapping them in tissue paper so they wouldn't crease before she even put them on. You even polished the little mother-of-pearl buttons at the wrists. You're not expected to go that far, but Mrs. Phelps watches, and you're still working your way out of her bad book since that scuffed boot incident last week. In the dressing room, the air is thick with the smell of rosewater and starch. Bottles line the vanity like soldiers. Lotions, perfumes, hair tonics. Miss Eliza sits in her dressing gown, barely acknowledging you. She holds a novel in one hand and lets her head loll back in the other, expecting you to brush out her hair without tugging. It's long, dark, and full of static. You gently pull a comb through it, careful not to snag. The goal is to be invisible, yes, but also perfect. You're quiet while you work. You always are. Personal servants like you aren't meant to speak unless spoken to. But sometimes Miss Eliza chats. Not to you exactly, just into the air, like you're part of the wallpaper. She mutters about Lady Wexley's ridiculous hat from last Sunday's service. She wonders aloud if riding with Lord Marchmont this afternoon will be dreadfully dull, or just moderately dull. You smile politely and say nothing. She starts asking about the new footman. What's his name? Does he ride? You say you don't know, which is a lie. Of course you know, everyone below stairs knows everything. But you've learned not to feed curiosity, especially not that kind. Next comes the corset, and here's where things get intense. The Edwardian corset isn't designed for comfort, it's designed to reshape. Not just cinch the waist, but lift the bust, smooth the hips, and, if done improperly, prevent proper breathing. You help Miss Eliza into hers with the grace of a magician, then begin lacing. Tighten, pause, tighten again. You count the eyelets with your fingers, measure the symmetry of the lines. She exhales deeply and says, "A little more," and you tug just a fraction tighter, watching the silhouette transform into what fashion dictates she must be. Once the corset is secured, it's time for the chemise, the petticoat, the stockings with their garters. Then the dress itself, stiff and structured, with a dozen hidden buttons and hook-and-eye fastenings you've memorized by touch. Finally, for the gloves and boots, you kneel to help with the latter, guiding her feet in gently and lacing them tight. By the time she's dressed, she looks like something out of a portrait. Elegant, composed, perfect. She gives you a single nod of approval, and you retreat without a sound. You'll return to tidy the room later. Right now another bell is ringing. You rush to the master's dressing room next. His valet has requested assistance. You don't know why, but when the valet calls, you don't question. He's in the middle of helping Lord Melton dress for a hunt. His lordship is half-dressed, bracing himself on the armchair while the valet struggles with a stuck cufflink. You slip in wordlessly, take the sleeve and work the button through with a twist and a snap. The valet nods at you, grudging respect, and you vanish again, like a draft under the door. Historical fact: Edwardian fashion for both men and women was intricate, time-consuming, and completely reliant on assistance. Even something as simple as a morning outfit could require help from 1 or 2 servants to put on, especially with restrictive corsets, spats, button boots, and elaborate hairstyles. Quirky fact: corset lacing wasn't just a functional act. It was sometimes used to communicate. A maid who laced too tightly might be sending a subtle rebuke. A too loose corset? A warning. It was a hidden language of tugs and ties, and some servants used it with careful intention. There's an ongoing debate among scholars about the power dynamic between personal servants and their employers. On one hand, valets and ladies' maids held close physical proximity and could influence everything from fashion to mood. On the other, they lived in near total submission. Was it intimacy or just another kind of control? The answer, like most things below stairs, depends on who's telling the story. You finally return to your quarters around 1 o'clock for a brief pause. Not lunch, that's too generous a word. You sit with the other housemaids, chewing silently on cold mutton and bread that crumbles into nothing. The kitchen maid looks exhausted. She's been on her feet since 4 and still has to wash up after the butler's special lunch service. She tells you the cook is in a mood, which means the afternoon will be long and loud. One of the footmen strolls past the door and winks. The other girls giggle. You don't. You know how that story ends. After lunch, it's time to return upstairs to check the wardrobes. Afternoon changes are common. Some family members change 2 or 3 times a day. Riding clothes, walking dresses, evening gowns. You sort through a mountain of silk and lace, removing stains with lemon juice and starching collars until they stand like little white battlements. There's a pile of mending too, a hem ripped by an overzealous dance step, a glove with a loose thread, a stocking with a hole that mustn't show. As you thread your needle, you wonder what it's like to be dressed by someone else. To stand and wait while hands lace your boots and button your cuffs. You try to picture it, but it's like imagining flight. You've watched birds, but you've never felt your own feet leave the ground. And then a bell rings. Again. The kitchen is hot enough to melt steel. You walk into the thick wall of steam and the smell hits you like a sack of boiled potatoes. It's a mix of mutton fat, onions, and whatever fish is being poached in the far corner under a mountain of dill. You don't flinch anymore. The kitchen is a battlefield, and you've got the scars to prove it, even if they're just invisible lines of fatigue behind your eyes. You're here to deliver a message from the housekeeper, but once you enter cook's domain, you know better than to speak first. The cook runs the place like an iron-fisted general. Her voice is louder than the range, and her knives flash too quickly to be purely culinary. She turns as you approach, wooden spoon in hand, and before you can get a word out, she's barking for you to move the basin of flour and check the bread in the oven. And you do, of course. There's no such thing as just popping into the kitchen. This is the heart of the house, and it beats to its own rhythm, faster, hotter, and always a few seconds from combustion. You dodge around the scullery maid, who's up to her wrists in grey water, scrubbing dishes from a meal she didn't eat and never will. The kitchen maid brushes past you with a tray of cold meat jelly trembling like it's nervous. The cook shouts for more suet, then changes her mind and demands someone find the celery salt, which no one has seen since spring. There's no standing still. Even leaning against a wall will earn you a sharp rebuke. Every inch of space is in motion. There are pies cooling, eggs boiling, sauces thickening, and fire roaring beneath it all. You grab a stack of plates and start drying them automatically, because it's safer to look busy. You hand the housekeeper's message to one of the footmen, who pockets it like it's a love note, then proceeds to carry a platter of aspic upstairs with all the ceremony of a royal decree. You help lay out the cold lunch in the side pantry. It's only for the family, of course. Delicate cucumber sandwiches, salmon mousse, and fruit arranged in a pattern that looks more like sculpture than food. You don't dare taste it. You never have, not unless you want to risk dismissal. There was a story last winter about a hall boy who snuck a bite of pork pie. He was gone the next morning, like smoke out of the chimney. The scullery is where the real horror happens. You pass through there next, and the smell nearly floors you. Old milk, soapy water that's lost its will to clean, dishes stacked like monuments to despair. The scullery maid, poor Elsie, has her sleeves rolled up past the elbow, red arms submerged in greasy grey liquid. She looks like she's aged 10 years since sunrise. You ask if she needs help, and she gives you a look somewhere between gratitude and surrender. You don't have to help, technically, but you do anyway. You roll up your sleeves and join her, scrubbing crusted platters with a rhythm born of necessity. The two of you work in silence, just the squeak of cloth on china and the occasional groan from the drain. It's strange how quickly misery can become routine. Historical fact, the Edwardian kitchen was a theatre of class and gender. Cooks, usually women, held immense power in the domestic hierarchy, sometimes earning more than male footmen or even junior valets. But beneath them were the kitchen maids and scullery maids, the lowest of the low, tasked with endless menial labour for the smallest pay. Quirky fact, some scullery maids wore leather pads on their knuckles to protect their hands from cracking open after hours of washing. Others used goose fat or cold cream to coat their skin, but many simply worked until their hands bled. One cook reportedly insisted on using scullery maids as human timers. If their arms turned red from the heat, the stew was done. There's an academic tug-of-war over the autonomy of the kitchen. Some claim the cook ruled that space absolutely, a sovereign in starched linen, while others argue that housekeepers or even the master dictated menus, leaving little creative freedom. But the one thing everyone agrees on? The kitchen was not a place for rest. By mid-afternoon your arms ache from scrubbing and your apron is stained beyond saving. You sneak a glass of water from the pump and sit for exactly 1 minute before the next task calls. You help the kitchen maid prepare trays for afternoon tea. That means slicing cakes so neatly they look untouched, arranging sandwiches with the crusts cut off. Because, heaven forbid, a lady bite into something rustic. When the trays are ready, the footmen sweep in like peacocks. They take the best jobs, always. The carrying, the serving, the dramatic unveiling of pudding under silver domes. You hand over your tray and the second footman gives you a grin that says thanks, but not really. You go back to cleaning the kitchen table, which now looks like a war zone of flour, egg and mustard. The cook throws you a bone. She lets you taste the raspberry tart trimmings she's about to discard. Just a sliver, but the sweetness cuts through the grease in your mouth and makes you close your eyes for a second longer than you should. For that moment you feel almost human. You remember a time before this, before aprons and scullery drains. You were younger. Maybe you imagined becoming a teacher or a dressmaker. You had a favourite book and a cat that used to sleep by your feet. Then your father lost work, or your mother fell ill, or you were simply born unlucky. And here you are, scrubbing and chopping and trying to stay on the right side of the cook. The dinner shift begins not long after tea. That means more prep. Peeling potatoes, cleaning leeks, plucking a chicken that arrived that morning with feathers still damp from the rain. Your fingers ache. Your back hurts. The soles of your shoes are worn so thin you can feel every tile underfoot. The cook is shouting again. Something about too much pepper in the consommé. The scullery maid drops a pan and gets a smack on the shoulder for it. You don't flinch. You keep working. Because that's what this life is. A steady climb through a day that never quite ends. And above it all, the family prepares for their evening meal, completely unaware that downstairs someone is crying over a burned sauce. You're in the linen room now, folding sheets so sharply you could use the edges to shave with. It's oddly satisfying in a way, perfect creases, precise corners, stacks that line up like books in a quiet library. But even this moment, this gentle ritual of starch and fabric, isn't peaceful, because your hands are raw from scullery work, and your back still hasn't forgiven you for yesterday's coal hauling, and because the bellboard could erupt again at any second. This is part of the daily grind. The middle hours when everything blurs together in a parade of tasks so routine your mind starts to wander. Fold the sheets, beat the rugs, dust the skirting boards, polish the stair rails. You're the invisible force that keeps the house gleaming, your hands smoothing every crease out of the world so that someone else can pretend it never wrinkled. You move on to the boot room. There, rows of the master's shoes sit like lazy soldiers waiting for attention. There are dress shoes and riding boots, wingtips and slippers, each with its own brush, cloth and polish. The smell is strong, leather, old wax, and the faint sharpness of ammonia. You sit on a low stool, pick up the first boot and begin to work the polish in with the circular motions, over and over. until the leather shines like a mirror that never shows your reflection. The boots aren't just footwear, they're a statement. The master will judge you on how they gleam, how they feel when he pulls them on. A scuff means a raised eyebrow. A crooked lace could mean being passed over for a more desirable shift next week. You don't take that risk. You finish the first pair and line them up neatly before starting on the next. There's a rhythm to it now. Wipe, buff, shine, repeat. Next comes the brass polishing. The doorknobs, the banisters, the fire irons. Anything that catches light has to sparkle. You dip a rag into the vinegar solution, already dreading the smell, and rub until your shoulders burn. The drawing room fireguard is elaborate. An ornate mess of swirls and filigree that traps dust like a spider web. You clean it anyway, thinking not of elegance, but of the calluses forming on your fingers. The family is out riding this afternoon, which gives you a brief window to tackle the upstairs rooms. You seize the opportunity and climb the backstairs, a pail in one hand, cloths in the other. You start with the nursery, where the youngest daughter has left her dolls lined up like they're awaiting trial. You dust them gently, careful not to disturb their perfect little faces. From there it's on to the morning room. Here you must be especially delicate. This is where Lady Melton keeps her porcelain. Dozens of dainty floral patterned teacups and saucers that cost more than your annual wages. You dust them with a cloth so soft it barely qualifies as fabric. Your hands shake a little, but you steady them with experience. You've done this before, just not on 3 hours of sleep. The drawing room is next. That means the rugs must be beaten, but not indoors, heaven forbid. You roll them carefully, hoist them down the back stairs, and haul them out into the yard. The rug beater is a brutal bamboo tool that makes your arms ache within minutes. Each hit sends up clouds of dust so thick you cough them out in layers. But the rugs must be fresh, unsullied by footsteps that never belonged to the family. Historical fact: servants in Edwardian households were expected to clean with obsessive precision. Linen was inspected for creases. Boots had to be polished inside as well as out. Even bed frames were scrubbed. Cleanliness wasn't just hygiene, it was morality in physical form, a reflection of a household's status and respectability. Quirky fact: some households used lemon juice, vinegar, and raw bread for cleaning. Yes, bread. A slice of day-old white bread could absorb soot from wallpaper or lift dust from delicate embroidery without damaging it. You've used it once under Mrs. Phelps' watchful eye, and the smell stayed in your hands for hours. There's debate among social historians over whether this level of domestic labour created a form of learned helplessness in the upper class. Did they genuinely not know how to do basic chores, or did they choose ignorance to maintain social distance? Either way, you've never once seen a family member lift a broom, not even when they drop something. They just look at it until someone else, usually you, bends down to pick it up. The day drags on. You're sent to help wash windows on the second floor. This means leaning out at precarious angles with a squeegee and hoping you don't lose your balance and go crashing into the rose garden. You wonder, as you clean, how the world would react if you did fall. Would someone gasp? Would your name be whispered for a week and then vanish? Or would they simply replace you by Thursday? You return inside, face flushed from sun and exertion, and check on the library. A guest has left it in shambles. Ash on the carpet, biscuit crumbs in the settee, and a tumbler of brandy sweating on the side table. You clean it all without a comment, removing every trace of their afternoon like you're erasing history. And in a way, that's exactly what you do all day. Erase. Smudges, messes, accidents, evidence. You make the world seamless, and your reward is more to erase. By now, the hall is busy again. Footmen pass with trays. The butler's voice can be heard giving low instructions, and the air smells of roast beef and something sweet baking in the oven. You glance at the clock and realise you haven't sat down since breakfast. Your feet throb. You can feel the seam of your stockings rubbing raw behind your heel. But you still have to check the linens again. The master complained of a crease in his pillowcase last night, and the housekeeper has decided you were the one to blame. You hurry back to the laundry room, sorting through stacks of freshly pressed pillowcases. Each one gets held to the light, inspected for stray threads, folded and stacked again. It's enough to make your eyes cross. Eventually, it all looks perfect, or perfect enough. You place the top pillowcase on the very top of the pile, just so, then slip away before anyone can notice you've stopped moving. You make it back to your room, just briefly, to change aprons and splash your face with cold water. You lean against the wall and breathe for 5 whole seconds. That's when the bell rings again, and the grind continues. Tea time should be calm. That's what everyone upstairs thinks anyway, that tea simply materialises, warm and neat and lovely, as if the china set had walked itself onto the tray. But for you, it's the most nerve-wracking part of the day. Every sugar cube, every teacup, every paper-thin slice of sponge cake is a potential disaster waiting to happen. All it takes is one chip in a saucer, one scalding overpour, one spoon out of alignment, and you'll be explaining yourself to Mrs. Phelps, who can spot a mismatched teaspoon like a hawk spotting a field mouse. Today tea is being served in the drawing room, and that means the full display. The good china, the Wedgwood set with the gold trim that can't go anywhere near the scullery, or else he might break into tears. You polish the silver tongs and the teapot lid, make sure the milk jug is full but not too full, and align the cups precisely on their saucers. The sugar bowl must be filled with cubes only. None of that loose sugar nonsense. Someone will notice. They always do. The tray is heavy. That's the first challenge. You balance it like a tightrope walker, arms locked and spine straight as you carry it through the house. You're so focused on the surface of the tea, keeping it from sloshing, that you barely register the corridor until you've passed through it. You make it to the drawing room, heart hammering behind your ribs, and knock gently. When the door opens, you step inside like a performer stepping onto stage. No eye contact, no wobbling, no sound except the faint clink as you set the tray down on the side table. The lady of the house is already seated, flanked by two visitors. You recognise one, a vicar's wife, endlessly polite and prone to asking your name like it's a parlour game. You serve the tea carefully, clockwise, milk first, sugar second, always offering the tongs, never fingers. The sponge cake is accepted with a nod. The cucumber sandwiches are dissected as much as eaten, and one of the ladies frowns at a bit of crust that slipped past the cook's knife. Your stomach clenches. You say nothing. It's not about the food. It never is. It's about the performance, about precision and polish and a servant's hands moving just fast enough but never frantically. The second you let a tremble show, you've lost, so you stand, quiet and composed, pouring tea while your arms. Okay, and your left foot scrimnan because you stepped on a loose floorboard on your way up the stairs and twisted something you don't have time to think about. You remember when you were first taught the tea ritual? The senior housemaid drilled it into you for weeks. The angle of the pour, the placement of the napkin, how to hold the strainer without clattering it against the rim. You practiced in the dead of night with an empty pot and water, spilling all over your hands until they were red and wrinkled. She said it would save your job one day, and you believed her. Historical fact. Afternoon tea in the Edwardian era wasn't just a snack, it was a ceremony. Upper-class households used it as an informal social event, and serving it correctly was a mark of both elegance and domestic control. Servants were expected to know each guest's preferences and serve accordingly, often without being told. Quirky fact, some elite families trained their maids to serve tea silently. Literally silently. No clinking, no breathing, not even the rustle of fabric was allowed. One household in Sussex required maids to wear felted shoes and turn the doorknob with a cloth to avoid clicks. There's some scholarly debate about whether tea service was more about reinforcing class divisions than actually serving a need. After all, tea was available to all classes by this point. But in households like this, the presentation of tea, who made it, who poured it, who watched it being poured, was part of a social script that kept everyone in their place. You weren't just serving tea, you were playing your part in a larger play. You stand in the corner while the ladies sip and gossip. They don't speak to you, but they talk about everything else. Who was seen riding with whom, which cousin got engaged, what the Prince of Wales wore to Ascot. It's a parade of names and places you'll never see firsthand, but could probably write a small guidebook on, just from overhearing so much of it. You notice Lady Melton touch her teacup twice in quick succession, a signal you've come to recognise. She wants another. You step forward, pour exactly 2 fingers of tea and retreat. She doesn't look at you, but if you'd been even a second late, she would have. Eventually the ladies finish, and the tray is cleared. You lift it once more, now heavier with half-empty cups, crusts and crumbs. You manage not to spill anything, but the second you're out of sight, your arms drop and your back curls. You carry it down the stairs like it's full of bricks and thank your past self for not wearing shoes with thin soles today. In the kitchen, you hand the tray off to the scullery maid, who groans when she sees the caked-on jam stuck to the cake plate. You smile sympathetically, then wipe your hands and go to reset for the next round, because there's always a next round. The second tea is sometimes informal, sometimes not. Depends on the guests. Tonight there's a chance someone might want refreshment before changing for dinner. That means putting together another tray just in case. A backup tea. You laugh softly at the absurdity of it. Tea for the possibility of tea. But you make it anyway, because that's the rule. You check on the linen napkins just to be sure they're still crisp. They are. You press them yourself, laid damp cloth over dry linen, and ironed it with all your weight until they lay flat as calm water. One of them has a thread out of place. You pull it carefully, tuck it under, and hope no one notices. You glance at the clock. Dinner prep has already started. You have about 20 minutes before the house turns into a frenzy of candlelight and china. You take one last look at the tea tray, shining silver, delicate porcelain, neat triangle sandwiches, and wonder how something so dainty could demand so much strength. The servants' hall is rarely quiet, but it's never as noisy as when gossip starts flowing. It hums beneath the surface of everything, between the clatter of cutlery, under the shuffle of boots in the corridor stitched into the threads of freshly folded linen. Gossip is the currency of the downstairs world, and tonight it's flowing fast. You're sitting at the long wooden table, swallowing spoonfuls of overcooked stew that tastes like someone waved beef in the direction of the pot and called it a day. Your hands are sore from polishing brass all afternoon, and your feet feel like you've run the length of Yorkshire twice over. But the ache dulls as soon as someone says, "Did you hear what the second footman found behind the green sofa?" Every head turns. It's Mary, the under-housemaid, who grins with the satisfaction of someone holding a royal secret. She leans in, theatrically, letting the silence stretch a beat too long, before delivering the bombshell. A corset laced so tight the boning was bent. Gasps, laughter, raised eyebrows. You join in the amusement, even though you're already doing mental gymnastics trying to figure out who was in the drawing room, who left when, and what sort of upper-class scandal might be hiding under the upholstery. It could be Lady Wexley's. She's been staying overnights lately, and has a habit of forgetting her gloves in suspicious places. It's not the first strange item to be discovered either. Last month someone found a torn love letter in the ash bucket. A month before that, a gold cufflink buried in the garden. The house has secrets, and those secrets trickle down, landing in the laps of the ones scrubbing the floors. Servants have eyes everywhere. You pass through rooms no one else sees at their most vulnerable. Bedrooms at dawn, dressing rooms mid-undress, drawing rooms after a little too much port. You know who drinks what, who reads which books, who sighs too often when Lord Marchmont is around. You know who cries quietly when no one else is listening, and who listens when they shouldn't. But it's not just the family that gets gossiped about. The servants' hall has its own hierarchies and dramas, like the footman who suddenly has new boots. Did he buy them, or were they gifted? The scullery maid who's been spending a suspicious amount of time in the laundry room, or the butlers, Mr. Davenant, who had an argument with the housekeeper last Tuesday that made the gravy taste angry for days. You try not to participate too much, it's a risky game. Gossip might be entertainment, but it's also ammunition. A whispered word in the wrong ear can get someone demoted, dismissed, or worse. Still, it's hard to ignore completely. There's something magnetic about it. The thrill of knowing something you shouldn't, and the rare dangerous feeling that maybe you're in on the story instead of just dusting around it. Tonight, the story drifting through the servants' hall is about the eldest son, Mr. Charles, and his late-night walks. Apparently he's been seen sneaking out of the east wing after midnight, wearing his evening coat and carrying a flask. The theories fly like pigeons in a courtyard. A secret lover? Gambling debts? Ghost hunting? The cook rolls her eyes and mutters, "He's probably just relieving himself where no one can see." Men always think their business is more mysterious than it is. Still, the idea of a moonlit rendezvous is more interesting than the truth, so the stories keep spinning. You take another bite of stew and let yourself be pulled into it. Historical fact. Servants' halls in Edwardian mansions were the nerve centres of below-stairs life. They weren't just places to eat. They were for planning, observing, venting, and, most importantly, spreading gossip. It was how news moved through the house long before any letters or messages reached official ears. Quirky fact, some households posted strict no-gossip rules with written signs in the servants' quarters, often ignored. In one estate, a fake gossip ledger was kept as a joke, where maids would scribble satirical entries about who wore what or who dropped a teacup on purpose. It disappeared mysteriously one day, and was rumoured to have been confiscated by the butler. There's debate among historians about how much power gossip really gave servants. Some say it offered a kind of subversive control, a way to reframe or resist the upstairs narrative. Others argue it was simply a survival mechanism, a release valve for people whose voices didn't matter officially. But no matter which theory you favour, one thing's certain: gossip was everywhere. As the stew disappears and the bellboard starts twitching again, the mood shifts. One by one, people get up, brushing off crumbs and complaints, returning to their posts like chess pieces, sliding back into play. You rise too, but slowly. Your body protests every movement, but your mind is still half caught in the tales of corsets and midnight strolls. Back in the corridor, you pass the butler, who gives you a single measured glance. It's impossible to read. He could know something. He could know everything. That's what makes him terrifying. Mr. Davenant has ears sharper than the bellboard, and eyes that have seen 5 generations of foolish heirs grow up and disappoint everyone. You return to the drawing room just in time to clear the last teacup. The lace doilies are only slightly stained, thank heaven. The ladies have gone to change for dinner, and the silence in their wake is almost holy. As you collect the plates, you notice a lipstick print on one of the cups, not the mistress's shade, a flash of red where there should have been rose. You pocket the cup's location in your memory, not because it's your job, but because information is power. Even if you never use it, just having it feels like something solid in a world where everything slips through your fingers. Later, as you dump the tea leaves into the bin and wipe your hands on a towel that's seen better days, you hear laughter from upstairs. The kind that's a little too loud. The kind that comes with secrets. And you think, not for the first time, that everyone in this house has something to hide. You know you're not supposed to use the main staircase. That's a golden rule, almost sacred. Servants don't cross the threshold of marble unless invited, and even then, only with their eyes lowered and their shoes silent. But tonight, with the house in full swing for dinner and the back corridor blocked by a stack of linen baskets and a very grumpy kitchen maid cursing under her breath, you take the risk. Just this once. Just a shortcut. No one will see. You hold your breath as you step into the wide hall, candlelight flickering off the polished banisters and mirrors so large they reflect not just your image, but the years of polish your hands have rubbed into them. The floor is slick beneath your shoes, waxed so thoroughly you have to adjust your steps to avoid slipping. You move carefully, tray in hand, heart pounding in your ears louder than any bell. The main staircase curves like a spine at the centre of the house, grand and sweeping, built not just to connect floors but to show off to guests how very important it is to own something so utterly impractical. Tonight, it's silent except for the faint strains of piano music drifting from the music room. Someone is playing Schumann, badly. You count your steps. 10 to the landing, 12 more to the upper hall. If you're quick and careful, you can drop off the tray in the guest room and disappear before anyone notices. But halfway up, you hear a door open. You freeze, tray balanced like a dinner plate at a magician's act, and turn your head just enough to see the silhouette of Mr. Charles. He doesn't see you at first. He's too busy straightening his waistcoat and adjusting his hair in a nearby mirror. You retreat 2 steps, pressing yourself into the curve of the banister, invisible in the shadow of a candelabra. He finally turns and walks away, oblivious. You wait for the sound of a door clicking shut before you move again, faster this time, cheeks burning. You make it to the guest room and drop off the tray, a bottle of lavender water and a small glass, requested an hour ago by Lady Wexley, whose dramatic sighs over dry air have become a daily ordeal. You don't linger, you retrace your steps, moving faster than you should, and just as you reach the landing, you hear footsteps. A voice, not angry, but sharp. "What are you doing up here?" It's Mrs. Phelps. Of course it is. She materialises like fog in autumn, all rigid posture and knitted brows. You bow your head. "Blocked in downstairs, ma'am. Had to come up the main way." She watches you a beat too long, then nods once. "Don't make a habit of it." Her voice is low, but it lands like a slap. "If you're seen, they'll think we're slipping." You nod, heart still racing, and descend the stairs in reverse, careful not to trip, careful not to exist too loudly. Once back in the kitchen corridor, you lean against the wall and finally breathe. Historical fact. Most Edwardian homes enforced a strict separation between servants and family, not just in work, but in space. Servants used narrow staircases, separate hallways, even different doorways. Being seen in the wrong part of the house could lead to punishment or dismissal, especially if it occurred during formal hours or in view of guests. Quirky fact: some grand houses had silent doors installed along main servant routes, heavily padded or felted to muffle any noise a servant might make passing through. Others used revolving panels or concealed doors to allow servants to appear or serve and vanish again like conjurers in waistcoats. There's debate about how much servants internalise these spatial boundaries. Some historians argue that the fear of being seen where you weren't allowed created a kind of invisible cage around servants, training them to self-police. Others believe many servants found creative ways to resist these rules, taking shortcuts, lingering in forbidden rooms, or accidentally overhearing conversations that weren't meant for them. You personally aren't sure which is truer. All you know is that getting caught up there felt like standing naked in church. Back downstairs, the butler gives you a glance that could mean anything. He says nothing, but you know he knows. Of course he does. He knows everything. Still, he doesn't report you, and that's the best kind of mercy you can hope for in this house. You return to your regular duties, checking the drawing room one last time, folding the fireside throw just so, brushing imaginary lint off the piano stool. Everything must be immaculate, not just clean, not just neat, immaculate. Because you are not just presenting a room, you're presenting a lie. That no one lives in this house. That nothing is ever spilled, broken, misplaced, or human. You straighten the cushions, you fluff the curtains, you light the fire, then brush away every trace of soot. The family will walk in and feel warmth without smoke, luxury without labour. They'll sit down and sip port and admire each other's collars, while their shadows dance across walls you scrubbed only hours ago, and no one will thank you. Not because they're cruel, but because in their minds you don't exist until something goes wrong. By now your legs are trembling from fatigue. You haven't eaten since your stew, and even then, barely. You head to the linen room for a brief moment of quiet, where you kneel by the baskets and let your muscles unclench. The house breathes around you. Voices above, footsteps echoing, the creak of pipes as hot water rushes upstairs. It sounds almost alive, and like any living thing, it doesn't care whether you're tired or terrified. It just wants to be fed, with labour, with silence. You press your head against the edge of the basket and close your eyes, just for a moment, just until the next bell rings. And when it does, you rise again. You finally collapse into your cot just after 11. The world above stairs has quieted, dinner cleared, candles snuffed, parlours emptied of laughter and wine-soaked piano playing. Only the occasional creak of wood or a door catching the wind reminds you that the house never truly sleeps. But you do. You have to. Your room is no bigger than a closet wedged under the eaves with sloped ceilings that knock your head if you sit up too quickly. The mattress is stuffed with straw, the blanket as thin as your last pay envelope, and the chamber pot at your feet is cold enough to turn your breath into fog when you use it. Your eyelids are already closing when you hear it. The bell. It rings just once. Soft, slow, but unmistakable. You lie still for a second, hoping someone else heard it first. Maybe the night footman? Maybe Elsie? But no, after a moment it rings again. A second time, longer, lower, insistent. You groan softly and swing your legs over the side. The floor is like ice. You shuffle into your shoes and button your uniform in the dark, fingers fumbling. You grab your apron from the chair, where it never really dries, and make your way out into the corridor. The upstairs hallway is dim, lit only by the occasional sconce left burning overnight. You move like a shadow through the servants' passages, avoiding the boards that groan and the spots where the wallpaper peels and shows the old plaster beneath. You've walked this house so many times, your feet know it without light. But still, something feels different tonight. There's a hush, not just quiet, but a kind of stillness, as if the house is holding its breath. The bell came from the blue bedroom, one of the guest rooms. You haven't been in there since the morning, when you freshened the flowers and dusted the mantel. You knock once gently and wait. No answer. You knock again. The door creaks open a touch. You peer inside. The room is empty. No guest, no light, just the faint scent of lavender water and old smoke. You step in cautiously, half expecting someone to rise from the armchair with a start, but no one does. You cross to the bell pull which hangs by the fireplace. It hasn't been touched. The cord sways slightly, but maybe that's your imagination. You turn and that's when you notice it. The window's open. Not wide, just a crack, but enough to let in the chill. The curtain flutters like a ghost's sleeve. You close it gently, latch the window, and back out of the room with a shiver prickling up your spine. Once in the hallway again, you pause. You're tempted to go to the butler to mention it, but what would you say? The bell rang by itself? He'd sooner think you'd lost your wits or had a guilty conscience. So you go back down instead, slip through the laundry corridor and return to bed. Or at least to the shape of bed. Sleep won't come now. You lie there, staring at the ceiling, thinking of every story you've ever heard whispered in the servants' hall about ghosts and cursed guests, and bells that rang with no hands to pull them. Elsie swears she once heard someone humming in the empty west wing. Mary claims she saw a pale face in the mirror of the south dressing room and refused to clean it for a week. You laugh them off during the day, of course, but tonight, in the stillness, your mind replays that bell, that open window. Historical fact. Many Edwardian households believed strongly in the supernatural. Spiritualism was on the rise, and séances were sometimes hosted in drawing rooms for entertainment. Meanwhile, among servants, especially those working in sprawling, creaky homes, ghost stories were almost folklore, passed down like recipes for boiled pudding. Quirky fact. Some houses were known to have haunted bells, wires that would twitch or chime even when untouched. Sometimes it was faulty wiring, sometimes rats in the walls, and sometimes just the result of old twisting buildings settling unevenly. But among the staff, these strange rings always started stories. There's a long-standing debate among cultural historians over whether ghost stories among servants were about belief or survival. Some argue that tales of haunted rooms were a way to claim space or resist certain duties. Oh, don't send me into that bedroom, it's haunted. Others believe they were a form of bonding, uniting staff through shared superstition in an otherwise rigid and divided world. Whatever the reason, you're not the first servant to stare at the ceiling wondering who or what rang the bell. Eventually the dawn creeps in like a soft intrusion. Grey light seeps through the cracks in the shutters, and somewhere below you hear the first clatter of coal being shovelled into the range. The house is waking up again, and so are you. You swing your legs over the side of the cot, groaning as your joints protest. Your back feels like it's been twisted into knots overnight, your neck stiff from sleeping too still, afraid to roll over and disturb the silence. You pull on your uniform, braid your hair quickly, and wash your face with water that might as well be ice. Your eyes look hollow in the cracked mirror above the basin, but there's no time to fix that. Downstairs, the air already smells of ash and damp. The cook is banging pans, grumbling that the delivery man is late. The under-housemaid sneezes twice and mutters that her head feels like a kettle about to boil. You join the rhythm without a word, slipping into your morning tasks like a foot into a well-worn boot. But as you pass the bellboard, you glance up. The blue bedroom bell still hangs a little crooked. Just a little, like someone tugged it too hard. You straighten it gently, then get back to work. Technically, you're off today. Or rather, you're off for a portion of the day. Just enough to remind you what rest feels like before it's snatched away again. In the servant hierarchy, even leisure time comes with rules. You get 1 half day per week and it rotates. No Sundays, obviously, and no evenings ever. Today, yours falls on a Tuesday morning, which is just about the least useful time to be free in the history of time. Still, when the clock in the hall strikes 10 and the kitchen door swings open, you're already out of your apron and into your best, well, your least bad dress. It's the one that doesn't smell too strongly of smoke and starch and only has one patched hem. You've brushed your hair, wiped your boots clean, and even dabbed a little lavender water on your neck, one of the last drops from the tiny bottle you've kept hidden since Christmas. You feel almost human. There's no grand outing today. No gallivanting in Hyde Park or shopping in Harrods like the young ladies upstairs. You don't have the money or the time for that. But you do have a plan. A walk into town, a stop at the post office, and maybe, a cup of tea in the tea room on the corner, if you can spare the coin. It's not much, but it's yours. Outside, the sky is overcast, the kind of English grey that's so regular it feels like wallpaper. The trees lining the lane drip gently from an earlier rain, and the smell of wet earth and horses fills your lungs. You walk briskly, arms wrapped around yourself, nodding, occasionally to other servants doing the same. Maids from the next estate over, a stable boy who always seems to be carrying something mysterious in a sack. Everyone has their own path on these precious half-days, but the same wary glance. We're out, but not free. The post office is your first stop. You hand over a letter you wrote late last night, a short but careful thing to your sister. She's in service too, down in Hampshire. You haven't seen her in 2 years, but she writes often, mostly about her lady's terrible cough and a cat that keeps sneaking into the larder. You include a pressed sprig of rosemary in the envelope, just something green to hold. Afterward, you browse the shop next door. It sells paper goods, bonnets, ribbon, and a selection of bored-looking books that appear to have been loved and then abandoned. You pick one up, a penny novel with a dashing soldier on the cover, and a heroine fainting at the sight of him. It's ridiculous. You buy it immediately. Then comes the tea room. You step inside, blinking in the warm, slightly greasy air. The room is full of quiet clinks and murmured conversations. You order a pot of tea and a small currant bun and sit in the corner, trying to stretch out every minute. The tea is lukewarm, the bun a bit dry, but it's served to you. For once, you don't have to carry the tray. That alone makes it feel decadent. You pull out your new book, open to the first chapter, and let yourself sink into it. The writing is dreadful, and you love it. There are secret codes and long-lost brothers and dramatic declarations made in the rain. You smile into your teacup and forget, for 10 blessed minutes, that your hands are chapped and your knees still ache from last week's scrubbing. Historical fact. Half-days were one of the few concessions made to domestic staff in Edwardian Britain. These brief moments of personal time were tightly controlled. Servants were expected to return before dinner prep began, and many used their hours for practical errands rather than leisure. Still, they were fiercely guarded. Quirky fact, some tea rooms in London had a separate entrance for servants and shopgirls, an unofficial side door where they could avoid judgmental glances from the better-dressed clientele. One cafe in Mayfair had a chalkboard and menu specifically labelled for working misses, offering a modest bun and tea for a penny. Scholars have long debated the role of leisure in servant life. Did these half-days represent true autonomy, or were they just another tightly restricted privilege meant to prevent rebellion? Some argue that even a single hour of self-direction could be empowering. Others say it was a pacifier, just enough freedom to keep you from realising how little of your life belonged to you. You finish your tea slowly, savouring every sip, even the last lukewarm mouthful. You tuck the rest of your bun in a napkin and wrap it carefully in your handkerchief. That will be your dinner, or part of it. Maybe you'll share it with Elsie, if she's had another day like the one last week when the soup boiled over and she nearly fainted from the heat. The walk back is slower. Your legs drag a bit. Your spine has found the memory of fatigue again. As you pass the milliner's shop, you glance in at the hats. Huge, ridiculous things with feathers and lace and price tags that might as well be carved in stone. One of them reminds you of the hat Lady Melton wore to church last Sunday. She complained about how heavy it was, as if someone had forced it onto her head against her will. You return through the servants' entrance, nodding to the footman polishing the brass handle like he's courting it. Inside, the air is thick with the smells of dinner. Gravy, roast, something fruity baking. Voices call across the scullery, pans bang against one another, and the calm of your morning slips away like a coat falling off your shoulders. You hang up your shawl, tie your apron back on, and slip into your place like a thread through a needle. It's as if you never left. And maybe, in a way, you didn't. You hear the trouble before you see it. By late afternoon, the scullery sounds like it's under siege. Pans clanging, water sloshing, voices pitched too high to be ordinary conversation. You round the corner and there it is, the unmistakable chaos that means one thing, a house party. You'd known it was coming. Everyone had. The family had been fluttering about it for a week, Lady Melton changing her mind daily about guest numbers, meal themes, and how many courses a Thursday dinner should contain. Still, nothing prepares you for the reality of it. The kitchen is a frenzy. Cook's apron is already stained in 3 places, her cheeks red with fury and heat. The kitchen maid darts past with a tray of raw oysters, almost colliding with you. The second footman is polishing silver like his life depends on it. You step aside just in time to avoid a bowl of stewed fruit that's somehow both boiling and already sticky to the touch. There is shouting, slipping, running, and somewhere someone is crying softly into a dishcloth. You haven't even begun your own prep yet. Your assignment for the evening is the West Wing. 3 guest rooms, plus turn down and fire prep. That means lighting the fireplaces in rooms that haven't been used since Easter, brushing down curtains, folding monogrammed linens, and placing fresh posies in the vases. In other words, making rooms that have been ignored for months look like they were touched by angels just this morning. You get to work immediately, hauling kindling upstairs in a basket that leaves splinters in your palms. The fires are stubborn, it's been damp, and the chimneys protest. You coax flames from the embers with the patience of a saint and the swearing of a sailor softly muttered under your breath. By the time all 3 hearths are finally glowing, you've shed your shawl, wiped soot from your cheek, and cursed at least one baron by name. Downstairs, the guests have started to arrive. You hear it in the front hall, boots clapping on marble, overcoats flung into the arms of footmen, the clatter of valises being lugged upstairs 2 at a time. Laughter trails down the staircase like perfume. The family's putting on a show, all smiles and handshakes and theatrical enthusiasm. It's not for you, of course, but you still watch it unfold from the top of the staircase just for a moment, just long enough to take in the gowns and the jewelled hairpins and the men with moustaches so groomed they probably have their own servants. Then you're off again. There's no time to linger. You help the lady's maid with one of the guest trunks, Lady Lavinia's, the notorious overpacker. It takes 3 trips just to bring her boxes upstairs. Inside are not only dresses, but shoes in velvet pouches, perfumes from Paris, and an alarming number of silk stockings in very daring colours. She doesn't even glance at you as you unpack them, but her dog does, a tiny puff of fur named Percy, who growls when you reach too close to his travel basket. Dinner is the real ordeal. Not for the guests, of course. They glide into the dining room in their silk and finery, discussing horses and opera, and how terribly amusing the king was last week. For the staff, it's a gauntlet. 12 courses. That's 12 times you'll carry hot plates into a room where you are not to be seen, nor heard, and absolutely not to speak unless someone drops something or sets fire to a centrepiece. The butler calls out orders like a field marshal. First comes soup, then fish, then game, then beef, then salad, then cheese, then pudding, then fruit, and on until your head swims with it all. You serve, you fill, you clear, you wipe and carry and nod and vanish. You refill glasses without being asked, catch the drip of gravy before it lands on Lord Everston's cuff, and somehow manage to keep a footman from sneezing near the souffle. It's exhausting, and you haven't even hit the halfway point. Historical fact: Edwardian house parties were sprawling affairs, often lasting several days. The upper class saw them as social obligations and opportunities to matchmake, gossip, or broker discreet deals. For servants, they meant double, or even triple, the usual workload, with no increase in pay and certainly no sleep. Quirky fact: some guests brought their own servants, who would then descend into your already packed servant quarters. This often created territorial skirmishes over everything from coal buckets to washing lines. It wasn't unusual for 2 ladies' maids, one resident, one visiting, to get into whisper fights over who had access to the better laundry soap. Scholars disagree on the actual impact of these events. Some argue that house parties were critical to maintaining elite power structures, reinforcing social networks that determined marriages, political alliances, and even inheritances. Others point out that the majority of the labour and the stress fell on the invisible class below stairs, whose sacrifices were necessary for the illusion of effortless leisure. The worst part of the night is the waiting. After the main courses are done, after the wine is flowing and the laughter is rising, you linger in the corridor like a ghost, listening, watching, ready to fetch a forgotten fan or a shawl or another bottle of champagne. You keep your hands folded, your face neutral, your ears open. You overhear everything and remember none of it. At least that's the rule. The party spills into the music room, then the drawing room, then the library. People wander like moths. At one point, Lady Lavinia asked you to find her a different book, the one with the red spine about Portugal. You find it in 20 seconds. She doesn't say thank you. By the time the guests finally retire, it's after 1 in the morning. You still have to tidy, empty the ashtrays, straighten the pillows, refill the wash basins and turn down the beds. You work on aching legs and numbed fingers, wondering how it's possible for a single person to shed so many gloves in one evening. You return to your room long after the last light has gone out. You fall into bed fully dressed, without even washing your face, and still you dream of trays and bells and footsteps that never quite stop. You wake up to stiffness, not the usual dull ache in your legs or the sore spot in your lower back from bending over hearths all day. This is sharper, sneakier, creeps up your shoulders and sets up camp in your neck. Your fingers feel thick. Your left foot has a new blister from those boots that are technically regulation but haven't fit you properly since Easter. Still, you get up. You always do. Today the house is quiet in that unnerving way it gets after a big event. like it's collectively nursing a hangover. The guests are still asleep, most of them having stayed up until the small hours laughing over cigars and cards in the smoking room. Even the butler's voice sounds half a pitch lower when he gives the morning orders. But that doesn't mean the work slows down. If anything, it's worse now, because everything must be restored to order before the first bell rings. You're posted in the laundry and linen rooms this morning, far from glamour but deeply revealing. Uniforms, dresses, and underthings from a dozen people all sorted, cleaned, pressed, and returned as if nothing human had ever happened to them. You work beside the laundry maid, Agnes, a woman with forearms like stone and an impressive disdain for the upper class. She says very little, but when she does, it's gold. No one with that many underpants deserves a title, she mutters, while wringing out silk bloomers. You laugh under your breath and keep folding napkins. There's a rhythm to it, crease, press, fold again. And before long, the table in front of you is lined with linen as precise as military ranks. You're sorting through a basket of crumpled cravats when you notice one with a peculiar stain. Lipstick. Not the soft rose colour the mistress wears. This is bold, scarlet, theatrical. Someone's been sneaking a kiss, and not in their own bedroom. You glance at the label, stitched initials, CM. That'd be Mr. Charles. You raise an eyebrow at Agnes, who just snorts and mutters, "Men," before yanking a pillowcase from the wringer. You say nothing, of course. Everyone says nothing. That's the rule. But you tuck the detail away, just in case. Later in the morning, you're called to help reorganise the uniform storage. That means pulling out the footmen's jackets and the housemaids' aprons, brushing them off, repairing loose buttons, and, most importantly, checking the hidden pockets. You learned early on that most uniforms have little secret folds and slits sewn into the lining. Officially, they're for coins, keys, maybe a handkerchief. Unofficially, they hold everything from love notes to purloined sweets. You find a half-eaten boiled sweet in the cuff of one maid's dress, completely fused to the fabric. In a footman's waistcoat, there's a scrap of paper with what looks like a poem. Bad handwriting, worse rhymes. You smile and slip it back into place. There's an old superstition among the housemaids. Never empty another servant's pocket without their blessing. Supposedly it brings bad luck. You're not especially superstitious, but you still follow the rule, not because you believe in curses, but because it feels wrong somehow to touch someone's secret without permission. Historical fact. Edwardian servant uniforms were not just practical, they were symbolic. They signalled rank, department, and even levels of discretion. The more senior your role, the more detailed your uniform. Some butlers had buttons engraved with the family crest. Scullery maids wore nothing more distinctive than an apron and exhaustion. Quirky fact. Some housemaids sewed tiny good luck charms into the hems of their aprons. Silver coins, beads, even snippets of fabric from their mother's dresses. One maid in Kent was said to keep a dried four-leaf clover stitched behind the buttons of her uniform, so the mistress don't notice my mistakes. There's some disagreement among scholars about the role uniforms played in shaping servant identity. Some argue that the strict dress codes erased individuality and reinforced class subjugation. Others suggest the servants used uniforms like armour, an identity to put on and take off. You suspect both might be true. You feel different with your apron on, not better, just other. After lunch, cold, rushed, mostly pickled, you're assigned to dust the display cabinet in the sitting room. That means unlocking the glass case with a tiny brass key and carefully wiping each item inside. A menagerie of porcelain animals, miniature clocks, and small ivory figurines that seem both fragile and disturbingly smug. You hate this job. One wrong bump and something shatters, and while they won't say it aloud, you know exactly who they'll blame. You keep your movements slow, steady, safe, but as you lift the third elephant made of God knows what and looking far too pleased with itself, the key you left on the tray rolls off and hits the hardwood floor with a crack. You freeze. Not because of the noise, it's minor, but because you know how this house feels about minor. You bend down, heart in your throat, and retrieve the key. No one comes. Still you hurry to finish the cabinet, close the glass, and lock it with care. When you leave the room, you can't shake the feeling that those little porcelain faces are still watching. You return to your quarters for a short break, 10 minutes if you're lucky. You sit on the edge of your cot and unpin your hair. It falls in tired waves around your shoulders, smelling faintly of smoke and starch and violets. You rub your temples and close your eyes. Maybe, if you don't think too hard, you'll remember what it's like to be a girl and not a gear in a very expensive, very exhausting machine. The bell rings. Of course it does. You pull your apron back on, tighten the knot, and step out into the corridor. Back to your uniform, back to your duties, back to the house. You always know when the butler enters a room, not because he stomps or makes a fuss, quite the opposite. It's the silence that follows him, the ripple of posture adjustments and lowered voices that spreads like a cold draft through the servants' hall. His name is Mr. Davenant, and if the house had a soul it would wear his face. You've never seen him run, raise his voice, or even appear remotely dishevelled. He is composure incarnate, with cuffs always starched, his collar blindingly white, and a pocket watch that never leaves his side. You've watched him from a distance for months now. He's not cruel, not exactly, but there's a coldness to him, a precision that makes your own movements feel clumsy in comparison. He knows every inch of this house, every key, every whisper, every drawer that doesn't shut quite right. If something is out of place, he finds it. If someone steps out of line, he knows before they do. Today you're summoned to assist him in the wine cellar, a rare assignment for someone of your rank. At first you think it's a mistake, then you think it's punishment. Then you stop thinking altogether because he's already calling your name with the same gravity one might use to read out a verdict. You follow him down into the cellar, the air growing colder with each step. The walls drip with age, lined with shelves that bow under the weight of bottles older than you. The dust down here smells expensive. Mr. Davenant moves between the racks like a priest through a sacred archive, tapping each bottle with long, deliberate fingers. 6 red, he says without looking at you. 2 port, 1 Madeira, carefully. You gather them quickly, cautiously, cradling the bottles like newborns. He watches, not you exactly, but the way you hold the bottles, how your fingers grip the necks. It feels like a test. Probably is. You've heard stories, of course, everyone has. That he was once a soldier, that he worked in a duke's household before this one, that he carries a letter in his pocket he's never opened. He's been with the Meltons for decades, longer than anyone else below stairs, longer than some of the family themselves. When you finish arranging the bottles into the basket he's laid out, he nods once. Good. Don't bruise the corks. You bite your tongue and don't ask what that means. He knows you're not used to this task, but he doesn't offer instructions. He just expects you to learn. By watching, by listening, by not failing. You follow him back upstairs, carrying the wine like it contains state secrets. Maybe it does. With the amount the Meltons drink, it wouldn't surprise you if most of the family's diplomacy is settled over brandy. Once back in the pantry, he begins inspecting the glasses for the dinner service. Each one is held to the light, turned, examined for fingerprints or smudges invisible to your eyes. You're told to polish them again, even though they already gleam. You obey. As you work, he speaks, softly, almost absently. Do you know why the glasses are shaped differently? He asks, still not looking at you. You hesitate. For the type of drink? Correct, he says. Burgundy, Bordeaux, claret, sherry. Each has its own shape because people like to think their wine matters more than it does. You stifle a smile. That might be the closest thing to humour you've ever heard from him. He finally looks at you. His eyes are sharp, ice blue and unblinking. A good servant, he says, anticipates the needs of the house. A great one ensures no one ever has to speak them aloud. You nod. You don't trust your mouth to answer properly, not when it's gone dry with nerves. Historical fact, the butler was the highest-ranking male servant in an Edwardian household, entrusted with everything from the wine cellar to the household accounts. In many homes, his authority rivaled that of the housekeeper, and he was often more intimately familiar with the master's business than the master's own family. Quirky fact, some butlers developed their own shorthand or symbols to track wine inventory and bottle usage, keeping secret ledgers and code. It was a way to maintain control and protect against accusations, especially in homes where liquor had a habit of vanishing faster than expected. There's a debate in social history circles about whether butlers held real power or simply the illusion of it. Some believe they were trusted advisors, even manipulators behind the scenes. Others argue that no matter how trusted they were, they still slept below stairs and could be replaced the moment they stumbled. The truth you suspect lies in Mr. Davenant's silence. Unshakable, unremarkable, and absolute. Later, after the glasses are arranged in perfect rows and the wine bottles are cradled in cloth like relics, he dismisses you with a nod. No thank you, no well done, just a nod. But it feels like applause. You leave the pantry and step into the hallway, blinking at the light. Your hands are stiff from polishing, your back still sore from yesterday's linen haul. but something in you straightens. You passed a test today, maybe only just. Maybe he'll never ask you again. Or maybe, if you keep watching, keep quiet, you'll learn more than anyone else below stairs ever gets to. The hall boy passes you in a rush, muttering about spilled soup and the cook's wrath. You offer him a sympathetic glance and keep walking. Past the servant stairs, past the dining room, back to your duties. There's silver to polish, table linens to inspect, a vase of tulips to rearrange because someone decided orange looks too aggressive. As you pass by the main staircase, you catch a glimpse of the family descending. Lord Melton is red-faced and laughing. Lady Melton looks like she hasn't smiled in a week. Mr. Charles trails behind, adjusting his sad cuffs, his eyes scanning for something or someone just out of reach. You lower your head, step aside, and vanish around the corner, because a great servant anticipates the moment and disappears before it arrives. You've learned to look without looking. It's part of survival. This sideways glance, this careful tilt of the chin that lets you see what's happening without ever seeming to. And right now, what's happening is Thomas the first footman grinning at Jane the upper housemaid like he's forgotten he's in uniform. She's pretending not to notice, smoothing her apron and fussing with the flower arrangement on the front hall console, but the blush crawling up her neck says otherwise. It's a familiar dance, and it's dangerous. Not because it's love exactly, but because love, in a place like this, is something that comes with consequences. You've been in service long enough to know that anything resembling romance below stairs walks a knife's edge. Every glance is judged, every moment of silence or shared laughter recorded in someone's mind for future ammunition. If a footman lingers too long beside a scullery maid, or if a housemaid goes missing for 15 minutes after tea, people notice. People talk. You, for your part, have avoided it, mostly. Once, maybe, there was something. A hall boy named Eddie, who used to leave you scraps from the bakery on Sunday mornings, a bit of sweet bun wrapped in cloth and hidden behind the coal scuttle. He had wide eyes and a crooked smile, and hands too big for someone so young. He's gone now, taken on as a deckhand on a ship bound for South Africa. You still think about the last time you saw him, just a glimpse as he walked away through the kitchen garden, coat over his shoulder, never looking back. That was over a year ago, and you haven't let anyone in since. There's no space for softness here, not when you share walls that are too thin, schedules that never align, and a future that hinges on someone else's whim. Still, watching Jane giggle behind her hand as Thomas delivers a tray of cutlery to the dining room, you feel something tighten in your chest. Not jealousy, not quite, just remembering. The house itself seems to conspire against affection. There are rules, both spoken and not. The housekeeper will turn a blind eye to a stolen glance, maybe even a letter or two, but only as long as it doesn't interfere with duty. And if it goes further, if someone gets careless or foolish, there are stories. One girl let a stable hand sneak up the servant stairs. He tripped on the runner and broke his ankle. Both were dismissed by morning. Still, feelings bloom where they shouldn't. In whispered conversations beside the coal bins, in slow smiles passed across laundry lines, in letters slipped into uniform pockets and memorised before being burned in the hearth. You've even seen Mrs. Phelps intercept one, open it right there in the hallway, read it, fold it, and say nothing, just hand it back with that cold little smile of hers that means, "You're lucky I didn't tell the master." Historical fact. Romantic entanglements between servants were common, though rarely tolerated for long. Employers often enforced rules forbidding fraternisation, especially between male and female staff. Marriages were occasionally permitted, but often one partner would have to leave the household afterward, sometimes immediately. Quirky fact, some servants developed clever ways of communicating love or affection without words. Handkerchiefs folded a certain way, cleaning cloths left in specific patterns, even shoes polished to different shines depending on mood. It was a secret code, right beneath the noses of those who insisted everything below stairs remain impersonal. There's academic debate about whether such relationships offered genuine escape or only further entrenched servants in a cycle of dependency. Some historians argue that love within service households created moments of hope and solidarity. Others believe it made the system self-sustaining, encouraging loyalty through personal ties rather than fair treatment. You suspect the truth lies in the middle. Love doesn't free you here, but it softens the chains. Later that afternoon, you catch Jane alone in the linen room. She's folding napkins with mechanical precision, humming a little tune under her breath. You raise an eyebrow, and she blushes again. "It's nothing," she says. Really, just silly talk. You don't press, you know better. But you glance down at the napkins. The corner of one is folded the wrong way, up instead of down. A signal, maybe. A message for someone who knows how to read it. You change the subject and offer to help her finish. Between the two of you, the stack disappears quickly. The quiet hum of work returns, the kind that covers thoughts too private to share aloud. That evening, as you're delivering water to the upper bedrooms, you spot Thomas again, this time in the corridor near the music room, pacing slightly, adjusting his collar like he's preparing for battle. You pass without speaking, but you catch the flicker of nervous energy in his posture. You wonder how far he'll go, if he'll slip Jane a note during dinner service, if he'll ask her to meet him behind the stable, if he'll make a mistake that costs them both. And you wonder, if it were you, would you risk it? You return to your room that night and find a scrap of paper under your pillow. It's folded neatly. You open it slowly, heart already beating a little faster. But it's nothing romantic, just a message from Elsie. "Don't forget the fire irons for the blue room, Mrs. P is checking." You smile despite yourself. But for a moment, it had felt like it could have been something else. And that in this life is sometimes enough. There are rules, and then there are the rules. The first are written somewhere, in a handbook maybe, or a list posted near the kitchen that's stained with old grease and ignored by everyone except the hall boy. Those are the obvious ones. Be on time, don't use the main staircase, no idle chatter above stairs, uniforms clean and collars straight. But the second kind, the real rules, aren't written down. They're older than ink, whispered through corridors, and passed between glances, woven into the muscle memory of everyone who's survived more than a month in service. You learnt those rules fast, like how you never sit before the butler does during a staff meeting, or how you never take the last scoop of pudding on stewed fruit day, even if the undercook says you can, or the golden law: when the family's in crisis, you don't ask questions, you keep your mouth shut, your eyes down, and your ears half open, just enough to know what not to do. This morning the house feels off, not chaotic, just wrong, like a painting hung a few degrees crooked. The bells have been quieter than usual, but not in a good way, more like the quiet you get before a thunderstorm hits. You notice it in the way Mrs. Phelps carries her clipboard, closer to her chest, like a shield. You hear it in the butler's voice, clipped and dry. And the cook, she's humming. She only hums when she's nervous. You're dusting the banister when you hear the first sharp bark of Lady Melton's voice from the library. Not the usual scold about jam jars or footmen walking too loudly, but something colder. Then comes Mr. Howes, Mr. Charles. Lower, grumbling, the word embarrassment sliding through the air like a knife. You don't catch the whole thing, you don't need to. You know something's broken upstairs, and all of you below stairs are expected to mop up the mess. Later, at the staff meeting, the butler confirms it. Lady Melton's sister, Lady Sybil, is coming to stay, which doesn't sound ominous, until he adds that she's arriving early, staying indefinitely, and has certain sensitivities that must be catered to. The room goes quiet. Mrs. Phelps closes her eyes briefly, as if summoning patience from the heavens. You don't know much about Lady Sybil, except that she's the black sheep of the family. Rumours float, something about a scandal in Florence. Or was it Paris? A fiancé who vanished, or fled. No one's quite sure. She's barely been seen in years, and now suddenly she's returning to the family manor like a bad dream that's remembered itself. The rule in situations like this is simple. Don't get involved, don't get curious, don't think you can be helpful by asking questions, and definitely don't try to be friendly. You'll be burned before you even realise you've lit the match. Still, you're assigned to prepare her room. The east bedroom hasn't been used in ages. It smells like mothballs and old carpets. You scrub the fireplace until your arms burn, beat the rugs into submission in the yard, and open every window wide. You add a posy of fresh lavender to the mantel, not because you're told to, but because something about it feels right. While you're making the bed, Jane wanders in with a pitcher of fresh water. "Think she's mad?" she asks, without looking at you. Depends who you ask. "I heard she speaks to birds. I heard she got arrested in Italy." Jane raises an eyebrow. "For what?" You shrug. "Depends who you ask." You both laugh quietly, but not for long. The east corridor carries sound too easily. That afternoon the family is in a twist preparing for her arrival. Lady Melton is pacing through the drawing room rearranging pillows that don't need arranging. Mr. K call me. Charles disappears into the wine cellar twice. and comes back without a bottle either time. The younger daughter, Eliza, just rolls her eyes and announces to the room that she hopes Sybil is mad. At least then she'll be interesting. The tension trickles down the hierarchy like cold soup. The butler snaps at the second footman for breathing too loudly. The cook curses at the veal as though it personally insulted her. Even the dog, Percy, seems more neurotic than usual, barking at the air near the staircase. Historical fact: unwritten rules governed much of the servant experience in Edwardian households. These social codes were passed down informally and dictated behaviour just as much as formal instructions. Breaking one, often without realising, could lead to censure, ostracism or quiet dismissal. Quirky fact: some houses developed their own signal systems among staff. A towel folded over a chair meant a guest had left in a mood. A silver knife laid sideways on the scullery table meant the cook was not to be disturbed, and a chamber pot left outside a door at the wrong angle could mean a guest was unwell, or something far worse. There's ongoing debate among scholars about whether the strict adherence to these unspoken codes created a deeper social structure among servants or merely reinforced the class divide. Some argue it offered stability and pride. Others believe it taught people to accept invisible chains. You think it might be both. A rule can protect you or trap you. It just depends on who's holding the key. Lady Sybil arrives just before dinner. You don't see her directly, not yet, but you hear her voice float up the servants' stairwell as she enters the hall. It's different. Lower, smoother, confident in a way most ladies of the house are not. You hear laughter that doesn't match the family's. It sounds genuine. Later, after dinner is cleared and the wine has been poured, you're sent up to light the fire in her room. The east bedroom is already warm, but you build it anyway, careful with the kindling brushing soot from the tiles. As you kneel, you hear her enter behind you. You rise slowly, bowing your head. "Don't stop," she says, voice light, a little amused. "It's a lovely thing to watch someone build something warm." You glance up just for a second. She's smiling. Not at you, but not at you either. You nod, gather your things, and leave. A new rule, you decide as you descend the stairs. Don't look too long at the ones who smile. They're the most dangerous of all. You've handled a lot of messes in your time. Chamber pots left too long, broken china from guests who talk with their hands. That incident with the dog and the roast duck you're all supposed to pretend never happened, but nothing prepares you for the disaster you find in the silver drawer. It starts like any ordinary morning. You're helping the second footman polish the service pieces for the afternoon luncheon. A routine so familiar you could do it blindfolded. The silver drawer creaks as you pull it open, same as always. You reach in to lift the tray of dessert forks and your fingers freeze. Something's wrong. Very wrong. A gap. An empty space where Lord Melton's ceremonial carving knife should be. You look again, count the handles. The knife isn't misplaced. It's gone. The second footman, Robert, sees your face and leans in. "What is it?" You don't answer. You just point. He goes pale. "No." "Yes." "No. No. No." You both stand there, staring into the drawer as if the knife might reappear if you squint hard enough. But it doesn't. And it won't. The carving knife isn't just a knife, it's a Sybil's. It's solid silver, with a hilt engraved with the family crest and a blade that's seen more pheasants than a gamekeeper. It's brought out twice a year for major dinners, displayed like an heirloom in motion. Losing it is not a small mistake. It's the kind of mistake people vanish for. You look at Robert. He looks at you. "Tell the butler." You nod, but your stomach Drossmindafnen doesn't take this kind of thing lightly. You might as well walk in and announce someone burned down the drawing room. He's in the pantry, going over the wine ledger when you arrive. You wait for a pause. He doesn't offer one, so you speak anyway. "There's a piece missing, sir. The ceremonial carving knife." He looks up slowly. One eyebrow lifts. "Impossible!" You say nothing. He follows you back, opens the drawer himself, and stands in silence. After a long moment, he closes it again gently. "Seal this room. No one enters the butler's pantry or the silver drawer without my say. Understood?" You nod. He leaves without another word, gliding out of the room like the tide pulling back before a storm. You're left to stand guard beside a drawer that's now full of ghosts. Whispers spread fast. By noon, the entire staff knows something's wrong. No one says stolen out loud, but it hangs in the air like steam in the scullery. You hear theories whispered over trays and between staircases. "It's the new kitchen boy," Mary says. always looking shifty. It was Lady Sybil, I bet, Jane mutters. She's been poking about where she shouldn't. I'll tell you what it was, the cook growls. Ghosts. That knife's cursed. Should never have been kept under the stairs. You want to laugh. You don't. The air is too heavy for that. Historical fact, silver theft was a real concern in large Edwardian households. Most kept detailed inventories, often updated weekly. Some families even had the silver pieces numbered and etched with their names to prevent resale at pawn shops. Loss of a major item could result in an entire staff being turned over. Quirky fact, in some households, butlers were required to weigh the silver before and after major events, just in case a piece walked away, and in one notorious case a servant was discovered to be hiding silverware in hollowed-out loaves of bread. When caught, he reportedly said, "I just wanted to set a proper table, sir," elsewhere. There's a scholarly debate about how much theft actually occurred, versus how much was assumed to occur. Some historians argue that suspicion was baked into the system, that trust was impossible when everyone below stairs was seen as a potential thief. Others believe many servants, severely underpaid and overworked, occasionally took what they felt they'd earned. Neither explanation helps you now, as you stand in the middle of the dining room holding a candelabrum like a shield. By late afternoon, Mr. Davenant begins the inspections. He calls in each member of the staff one at a time. You're summoned just after tea. You stand in front of him while he paces the length of the pantry, hands clasped behind his back. "Where were you yesterday between 5 and 7? He asks. "In the linen room, sir, with Jane folding napkins." "Anyone else see you?" "No, sir, but we were there the whole time." "Would you swear to that?" You hesitate. "Yes, sir." He nods slowly. Then he fixes you with a look that feels like it could cut straight through your apron. "If you know anything," he says, "speak now, though there won't be a second opportunity." You shake your head. "I don't, sir." He holds your gaze for a long moment, then nods. "Very well, that will be all." You love feeling as if your knees might give out. Down the corridor, Jane is waiting. She looks at you, eyes wide. "Did he?" "No," you say, but he knows something. The day passes in a fog of unease. Every creak sounds suspicious. Every servant carries themselves differently, more rigid, more wary. There's a shift in the air, like the house itself is watching now. After dinner, as you clear the dessert plates, you overhear something you weren't meant to. Lord Melton, speaking in the drawing room, voice low but tense. "If it doesn't turn up, we'll have to contact the authorities. I won't have a thief under my roof." You swallow hard and walk a little faster. Later that night, as you climb the servants' stairs, you see the door to the attic corridor slightly ajar. No one uses the attic rooms anymore. Not unless there's a full house. You hesitate, then move closer, just to check. Inside, the room is empty, dark, except for a small glint under the bed. You step in, heart pounding, and kneel. There, half hidden beneath the dusty bed frame, is the carving knife, wrapped in cloth, and blood on the blade, just a drop, maybe two. You stare, you don't move. The house has never felt so quiet. Christmas in the house is a grand affair, for the family. For you and the rest of the servants, it's a symphony of scrubbing, scolding, and smiling at people who won't remember your name. You begin the day before sunrise, the scent of pine needles and wood polish already clinging to your uniforms as you haul buckets of water up the servants' stairs. There's a fire to stoke in every single room, presents to place just so under the tree, and 100 tiny decisions to make, none of which are yours. The main hall has been transformed. Garlands loop across banisters like ivy gone mad. Wreaths crown every doorway, and the tree, taller than the second footman and twice as elegant, has been adorned with glass baubles, silver stars, and actual lit candles. You remember last year when one of the candles caught a ribbon, and the parlour nearly went up in flames. They still made you polish the scorched floorboard. The family loves Christmas. That is, they love the idea of Christmas, the aesthetic, the sparkle, the Victorian fantasy of it all. They don't see the scullery maid blanching over puddings that take 6 hours to steam, or the underfootman carrying 4 turkeys up from the cellar while trying not to knock over a bowl of jelly that's been quivering since Tuesday. You're assigned to dining room duty today, which means silver, linens, and the long, long table that has to look effortless. You iron the tablecloth with such precision it looks more like architecture than fabric. You fold napkins into swans. because Lady Melton read about it in the Times and thinks it's charming. You line up the crystal glasses so perfectly they reflect the candles in miniature rows of flame. And then there's the meal. A feast, a show, an Olympic event for cutlery. Goose, turkey, roasted vegetables, potatoes 3 different ways because variety is elegance, plum pudding doused in brandy and set alight in front of everyone like a circus act. You and the others serve it in synchronised silence, a dance of trays and ladles and aching backs. The footmen are stiff in their white gloves, but you know they're sweating. One of them nearly dropped the gravy boat when the baby cousin sneezed unexpectedly. You saw it. You didn't laugh, not because you weren't tempted, but because the butler was watching and joy is only allowed if it's upstairs and expensive. At the sideboard you wait for your cue. Lady Melton's in rare form, smiling with that pinched satisfaction that says this will do. Mr. Charles is already on his 3rd glass of wine and telling a story with elaborate hand gestures about the time he shot at a fox and hit a scarecrow instead. Everyone laughs. Even Lady Sybil, though her laugh is different, dry and sharp and somehow more honest than anyone else's at the table. You catch her eye once, not for long, just a flicker, a glance. She raises one eyebrow. You look away. Downstairs, the servants' Christmas celebration is scheduled for after the family dinner, which means you get to celebrate at roughly 11 p.m. surrounded by crumbs, dishwater and the smell of overcooked carrots. There's a goose, one of the smaller ones, reserved for staff, and a pitcher of ale that tastes like it had a difficult upbringing. The pudding is burned, the candles are stubs, and yet somehow it feels real. Everyone's tired, everyone's sore, but for a moment the weight lifts. Someone starts humming a carol. The kitchen maid slips a bit of brandy into the tea. The hall boy does a ridiculous imitation of the master that has everyone howling. Even Mrs. Phelps allows herself a smile, though she quickly covers it with her hand. You take a moment to sit. Just sit. It's been hours since you were off your feet. You sip your tea and feel it warm you from the inside out, even if it's weak. You watch as Jane hands Thomas a poorly wrapped parcel, something stitched, maybe gloves or a scarf. He looks stunned. She pretends not to care. He's grinning like a fool. You receive a gift too, nothing fancy. A pair of wool socks and a tin of lemon drops wrapped in brown paper. There's no name on it, but you know who it's from. You look across the room and catch Robert's eye. He shrugs. You nod. That's the only exchange you need. Historical fact. Christmas was one of the few times in the Edwardian calendar when servants received formal recognition. They were often given small gifts, a glass of port and a half-day off on Boxing Day, but it rarely meant rest. The holiday also brought extra guests, more food and double the work. Quirky fact, some upper-class households took the idea of Christmas spirit quite literally, hosting plays or pantomimes where the servants were expected to perform in costume, maids as angels, footmen as shepherds. In one documented case, a scullery maid was dressed as a Christmas pudding and made to stand in the hallway for cheer. There's debate among historians about whether these Christmas celebrations for servants were genuine gestures of appreciation or just performances of generosity. Some point to the gifts and warm meals as evidence of goodwill. Others argue it was all about optics, giving just enough to keep loyalty without ever challenging the hierarchy. You think it's a little of both. Gratitude wrapped in control. After dinner, after the toasts, after the yawns and the sighs and the final slice of dried fruitcake, you wander to the back steps for a breath of cold air. The sky is clear, full of stars you rarely get to see through kitchen windows. Your breath comes out in clouds. Your hands are cracked. Your spine is sore. Your feet feel like stone. But there's peace here, in the dark. Inside, Lady Melton is likely peeling off her gloves and requesting a hot water bottle. Mr. Charles is pouring one last brandy. Lady Sybil, well, who knows? She might already be halfway through a book or halfway out the window. Nothing would surprise you. You sit down just for a moment and pop a lemon drop into your mouth. It tastes bright and sharp and like something you haven't had in years. You close your eyes, and for the first time all day you suddenly smile. You wake up in darkness, but this time it's different. Your body isn't just sore, it's screaming. Your limbs feel like they've been soaked in lead, and your stomach lurches the moment you sit up. You fumble for the pitcher by your bed, but your hands shake too hard to hold it steady. The water sloshes onto your skirt, cold against your knees, and for once you don't even care. You lean against the wall and try to steady your breath, but the spinning won't stop. You're sick. Not just tired, not just hungry, not just sore, properly sick. You've seen this happen to other servants before. It usually starts like this: a sudden ache, a bit of dizziness, ignored until it becomes impossible. You remember that housemaid at the estate over who coughed through dinner service for 2 weeks before collapsing in the boot room. They sent her home, or rather, they sent her away. No one's ever really said where she ended up. She never came back. You try to stand, but the floor tilts beneath your feet. You grip the edge of your wash basin and breathe through your nose, trying not to retch. You've made it through 100 days worse than most people's nightmares, but this feels like a defeat. Not a loud one, not dramatic, just quiet. A slow, awful giving way. Downstairs, the house is already awake. The distant clatter of pots, footsteps pounding the corridor, voices calling instructions. You're due in the drawing room in 20 minutes to help prepare for a luncheon. Linen, silver, crystal, the usual performance. You try to stand again and this time manage a few steps. You splash cold water on your face and look into the mirror above the basin. It's not good. Your skin is pale, your lips dry. There's a line between your eyebrows that wasn't there before. You button your uniform slowly, skipping the top button because your hands won't stop trembling. Every motion feels like you're underwater, but still, you go. Of course you go. The hallway spins. You grip the banister as you descend the servants' stairs, and each step is a negotiation. When you finally reach the kitchen, no one looks at you at first. The cook is already shouting about the goose being too small, and the scullery maid is elbow deep in a pot of yesterday's stew. The usual noise, the usual chaos. You slip into your place beside the linen press and try to look useful, but then Robert passes by and does a double take. "You look like death," he says, not unkindly. "Feel like it," you mutter. "You should go back upstairs." "I can't." "You should." You shake your head, but it's not convincing. The floor seems to shift beneath your feet again, and this time your legs give out. It happens so quickly you barely register the sensation. Just the sudden cold of the tile against your cheek and the sound of someone shouting your name before the world fades to black. When you wake, you're back in your room. Someone's pulled the curtain closed and left a pitcher of water by your bed. There's a folded cloth on your forehead, now warm, and the faint scent of mint and vinegar hangs in the air. For a moment you wonder if you've died and come back as a very tired ghost. But then Jane appears in the doorway. "You fainted," she says, sitting beside you, in front of the entire kitchen staff. "You missed the pudding fire, by the way." You manage a weak smile. Was it spectacular? Robert lit the edge of his sleeve, so yes. You try to sit up. She gently presses you back. "Don't be daft, you're not going anywhere." "I'll get in trouble." "Mrs. Phelps has given you the day." You blink. She has? She even brought you a lemon posset. Didn't say it was from her, of course, but I know her handwriting. This is unexpected. Mrs. Phelps, soft? It doesn't track. But then again, even the hardest people downstairs know what it means to get sick in service. No one's indispensable, not really. But there's a quiet understanding when one of you goes down, it rattles the system. Everyone feels it. Historical fact. Edwardian servants had little to no job security when it came to illness. Many were dismissed for extended absences, especially if the household could not afford extra staff. Those who fell ill often returned to family homes, workhouses, or charity hospitals, many never recovering employment. Quirky fact, some households had informal nursing kits prepared by the housekeeper, a tin of smelling salts, a bottle of tonic, mostly alcohol, and a tightly folded nightshirt no one ever wore voluntarily. The belief in fresh air and vinegar-soaked cloths was almost religious. Cough syrup often contained opium. There's significant historical debate over whether servant health was actively protected or merely tolerated. Some argue that good employers ensured medical attention and rest out of obligation or guilt. Others point to widespread abandonment of sick staff as proof that a servant's value was purely physical. You suspect both are true. It depends on the house, and the day, and how visible you are when you fall. The rest of the day passes in a haze. You sleep in fits, waking between strange dreams. Someone brings you tea, lukewarm but sweet. Someone else, Elsie probably, leaves a note. Don't die. It's annoying when people die. You chuckle weakly and drift off and again. By evening, you feel just strong enough to sit up. The fever has broken, though your limbs still ache like you've been pulled through the mangle. You stare at your hands, your tools, and wonder how long they'll keep moving before the next collapse. You lie back down, watching the candlelight flicker against the wall. From the corridor outside you hear laughter. A bell. Footsteps running. The house doesn't stop, not for anything. You close your eyes, grateful for the stillness, and wait for your strength to return, quietly hoping it does. You're well enough to return to work, but everything still feels a half-beat too slow. Your arms don't move the way they should, and every step feels like it requires permission from the ground. The house hasn't waited for you. Of course it hasn't. One day off and it's like you were never part of the rhythm at all. Rooms have shifted, tasks you usually handle have been divided, rearranged. There's a new blister on your heel by the time you make it down the servants' stairs. A quiet welcome back from the job that nearly broke you. The hallway buzzes with post-breakfast chaos. Trays being returned, the bellboard twitching like an irritated cat, and Mrs. Phelps already calling out a list of instructions like it's a spell designed to keep the house from falling apart. You don't ask for sympathy. That's not how this place works. Instead, you get back to it, freshening the drawing room, sweeping ashes from the parlour grate, sorting laundry with Agnes, who barely acknowledges your return except to grunt, "Don't cough on the starch." It's while you're folding linen that you hear the whispers. Quiet at first, then more distinct. Something's off. Again. But this time it's not silver gone missing or a guest falling ill, or Lady Melton deciding she suddenly hates yellow flowers. It's about Thomas. He's not here. More than that, he hasn't been seen since yesterday afternoon. Jane's the one who tells you properly, tugging you aside by the corridor near the side pantry. He was supposed to help bring down the trunks after the guests left. Never showed. They looked everywhere. Did he go home? She shakes her head. Left his jacket, his boots. You feel the air change, just slightly. The kind of shift you've come to recognise. Not a storm, not yet, but a gathering of something. The staff has lost people before. They come and go, dismissed, transferred. Sometimes they get better offers or worse letters, but they don't just vanish, unless they have a reason. You don't say what you're thinking, but Jane sees it on your face. "I know," she says, "but don't say it." The day stretches long. You find yourself retracing the places Thomas might have been, his usual haunts, the nook by the boot rack where he used to sneak sips from a smuggled bottle, the cupboard off the pantry where he and Jane once spent 15 scandalous minutes that the entire servants' hall pretended not to notice. Nothing, not even his gloves. By late afternoon, the butler finally addresses it. In the middle of staff tea, he clears his throat, which is more dramatic than shouting, and says, "Thomas has been called away. Family emergency." He sends his apologies. No one believes a word of it, but everyone nods anyway. You're sent up to the west bedroom just before dinner. It hasn't been used in months, but now suddenly the fire must be lit, the linens replaced, the silver brushed. The guest hasn't arrived yet, but the room must be perfect. You wonder if this has anything to do with Thomas. It feels connected somehow. Everything in this house does, even if the threads are too fine to see at first. You kneel by the hearth, setting the kindling carefully, and that's when you see it. Just barely visible under the wardrobe, something small and white. You reach for it, hand brushing dust, and pull it free. A glove. Not a guest's glove, not one of the fine leather things Lady Lavinia wears with her Paris perfume and unnecessary feathers. This is plain, worn, familiar. Thomas's glove, and there's something inside it. You open it slowly, heart already picking up speed. It's a folded piece of paper. No address, no name, just a few lines in his uneven scrawl. "I can't stay. I've done something they'll never forgive. Don't look for me." You sit back on your heels. The room feels colder. You reread it twice. The handwriting is shaky, rushed. But it's his, no question. You don't know what to do. If you tell anyone, they'll ask how you found it, why you kept it, why he would have left a note like this hidden instead of giving it to someone. You could lie. Say you found it in the scullery. Say Jane handed it to you. But even lies take time to plan, and you don't have time. Not in this house. So instead, you fold the note again, tuck it into your apron, and return to your duties. Historical fact. Servants disappearing wasn't as rare as people think. With low wages, little security, and long hours, many simply left. Some fled debts or scandals. Others were dismissed quietly to avoid tarnishing the family's reputation. It wasn't uncommon for a servant's absence to be explained away with vague phrases like "gone to an aunt" or "called to another position." Quirky fact. In some households, disappearing without formal notice was considered not just rude but illegal. Servants could be reported for absconding, a minor criminal offence, that often led to police involvement and blacklisting from future employment. Some even had their wages withheld or belongings confiscated. Historians still debate whether servant disappearances were acts of rebellion or desperation. Some frame them as quiet protests against a system that demanded everything and returned so little. Others argue they were last resorts, actions taken only when all other options had failed. You think maybe, for Thomas, it was both. Maybe whatever he did, whatever he thought he did, was enough to drive him away, or maybe he just saw a crack in the wall and ran for it. That night, Jane doesn't eat. She sits at the table, staring at her tea like it might tell her something. You pass by and press your hand to hers under the table. She squeezes back once and doesn't let go for a long time. Later, in your room, you take the note out again. You read it in candlelight. The words are still smudged, still raw. You fold it, not just once, but 3 times, and slide it beneath the floorboard near your bed, between the cracked slats where the dust collects and secrets go to sleep. You lie back and wonder what it costs, really, to vanish. You know something's wrong when you hear porcelain shatter before breakfast. That specific sound, the high, sudden crash of a plate or teacup or saucer hitting tile, is the music of disaster in this house. It means someone's slipped, someone's sapped, or someone's luck has run out. You're still pinning up your hair when the noise echoes through the servants' stairwell, followed by a muffled sob and a slammed door. It vibrates down the walls like thunder. It's the new girl. Her name's Alice. She arrived only 2 weeks ago, straight from some village with more sheep than street lamps, and you've barely had time to remember her last name before she became part of the blur, but now she's front and centre and not in the good way. You pass the scullery and see her crouched on the floor, bits of broken plate glittering around her like jagged snow. The cook is red in the face, muttering under her breath as if she's rehearsing how best to yell at a ghost. You kneel beside Alice without saying anything. Her hands are trembling, eyes wide with the kind of panic only someone new can still afford to feel. She's whispering, I'm sorry, over and over. You grab a cloth, guide her fingers away from the shards, and start picking them up yourself. She's cut her thumb, nothing deep but enough to leave a red smear on the white floor. She shouldn't even be in here. The cook huffs from the stove, pretending she doesn't see the blood. I said the china was for lunch and not breakfast, but nobody listens anymore. You ignore her. You've learned to let Cook's fury roll off like water on wax. Instead, you look Alice in the eyes and ask gently, Did you eat this morning? She hesitates and shakes her head. Of course not. She was probably too nervous, or too busy, or too low in the pecking order to get a seat at the table before the bell rang. You guide Fuugi her to the bench near the back door and press the cloth to her thumb. She keeps apologising, but quieter now. Later that morning, you see Mrs. Phelps cornering her outside the linen room. You don't catch all of it, but the tone says enough. Firm, controlled, the way someone would speak to a thread that started to unravel. She's going to get sent off, Jane whispers beside you as you stack fresh towels. Not yet, you say, but you're not sure. Alice isn't the first to crack. The house eats people. It gnaws at their confidence and grinds down their joy until they're left with nothing but trembling hands and a pair of bad shoes. It's not always the hours or the weight of the trays or even the cold, but it's the constant pretending. The endless shrinking of yourself to fit inside invisible lines. You remember your first mistake. Over-polished the brass of all things. Left streaks. The butler made you redo the staircase banisters 3 times. Your hands were raw for a week, but you'd had Jane then, and Robert, and even old Agnes, who barked like a dog but slipped you an extra biscuit that night and muttered, "It won't be your last." Alice doesn't have anyone yet, so you find her in the corridor after tea and walk with her to the linen press. She doesn't speak at first. You just fold towels together in silence, side by side, until her breathing slows. "They said you were strong," she says suddenly. You blink. "Who?" "The kitchen maid. Said you never cry. Said you're too quiet to be scared." You let out a laugh that feels old. "I cry. I just don't do it where they can see." She looks at you like she's not sure whether to laugh or cry herself. "You'll be all right," you say, "if you don't try to be perfect." She doesn't reply, but she doesn't look quite as breakable anymore either. Historical fact. Turnover in Edwardian domestic service was extremely high, especially among lower-ranking maids like scullery and under-housemaids. Harsh conditions, long hours, and social isolation led many to leave after only a few weeks or months. It wasn't unusual for households to cycle through dozens of young women in a single year. Quirky fact, some new maids were given induction guides by more experienced staff, little handwritten notes or whispered tips about how to survive the first month. In one London household, there was even a servant-written handbook passed down among generations, filled with cheeky commentary and survival tactics like, "Always smile at Lady Edith, even when she's shouting." There's debate among labour historians about whether domestic service was empowering or exploitative for women. Some argue it offered economic independence and social mobility in an age when options were limited. Others say it was a gilded cage, trading wages for control. What's clear is that success depended on more than hard work. It required knowing the rules, especially the unwritten ones. By evening, the incident is already being forgotten by everyone who wasn't involved. The house moves forward. The drawing room is reset. The dining table sparkles. Upstairs, the family laughs over their roast pheasant and crumbles plum pudding while you sweep the last traces of broken porcelain into the dustpan. But Alice remembers. You catch her later, tucked into the corner of the scullery with a piece of bread she's probably stolen from the pantry. She looks up when you pass. You raise an eyebrow. She hides the bread behind her back. You say nothing. She'll survive, you think, because now someone's shown her how. The day you're promoted to lady's maid is a strange one. Quiet and curiously hollow. There's no announcement, no formal notice, just a summons from Mrs. Phelps after breakfast, her voice brisk and unreadable as she hands you a fresh apron and a list of duties longer than your arm. "The mistress has requested you," she says, tapping the paper with her fingernail, "for personal service, starting immediately." You blink. "Me?" "Yes, you. Don't make a fuss about it." And that's that. You've gone from housemaid to lady's maid in the space of a single breath. The other maids exchange glances but say nothing. No one congratulates you. Jane only gives a small nod, and you can't tell if it's approval, envy, or a warning. Because this isn't like the novels, it isn't a dream come true, it's a shifting gravity. Your world is suddenly different. The air tighter, the rules sharper. You now serve her, Lady Melton, in all her silk-wrapped, violet-scented, razor-tongued glory. You're not just in her house now, you're in her orbit. Your first task is to prepare her dressing room. You tidy her brushes, line up her pins, lay out the gown she's selected with a note pinned to it. The blue, not the green. You iron the collar flat, smooth the bodice, and hang it just so. The room smells like expensive powder and disappointment. She enters without knocking, of course, just sweeps in with the air of someone used to controlling weather systems. Her eyes pass over you like you're a new lamp. You keep your gaze low. "Do you know how to manage lace?" she asks, already removing her gloves. "Yes, ma'am." "Do you know how to press silk without spotting it?" "Yes, ma'am." "Do you speak French?" "No, ma'am." She frowns. "Then we won't talk while I'm dressing. That suits you just fine." She lets you unfasten her bodice, carefully avoiding the silk flowers at the shoulder. You undo the hooks, slide the fabric down her arms, unlace the corset in quiet motions. Her skin is pale where the boning pressed into it, marked like paper folded too many times. You help her into her afternoon gown and fasten the tiny pearl buttons that line her back like a string of secrets. She says nothing more, just sits while you style her hair into the precise chignon she's worn every Tuesday for the last 3 years. When you're done, she glances in the mirror. "Good enough," she says, and leaves the room. You're alone again. You exhale. This will be harder than you thought. Historical fact: ladies' maids were the highest-ranking female servants in a household, responsible for the personal grooming, dressing, and well-being of their mistresses. They were expected to be discreet, efficient, and almost invisible, yet they often enjoyed slightly better quarters and meals than lower servants. It was a position of both privilege and pressure. Quirky fact: ladies' maids often developed a strange form of intimacy with their mistresses, handling undergarments, managing hair, cleaning up after illnesses or emotional outbursts, but were rarely spoken to as equals. Some mistresses insisted on being dressed in silence, while others treated their maids like captive audiences for long, meandering monologues about art, men, or their latest hat. Scholars argue over whether the role of lady's maid offered actual social advancement. On paper it did: higher wages, better status, close proximity to the upper class. But in practice, many maids found themselves isolated between two worlds, not trusted by the family and resented by the staff. You feel that divide immediately. Downstairs, your old place at the servants' table is gone. You're now served last, seated beside Mrs. Phelps, where conversation is more rules than chatter. The scullery maid won't meet your eyes. Jane looks at you sideways, as if she's waiting for you to apologise. You don't, but it stings. That evening, Lady Melton asked you to brush out her hair. 100 strokes, slow and even. She sits in silence while you count under your breath, the silver brush heavy in your hand. Her hair smells like jasmine. At the 32nd stroke, she says, "You'll sleep in the small room next to mine now, in case I ring during the night." You nod. At 50, she says, "The last one left too slowly. Always fumbling with hooks. It was embarrassing." You nod again. At 70, she asks, "Do you have a sweetheart?" You falter. "No, Mum." "Good. I can't abide daydreamers." By the 100th stroke, her eyes are closed, her face soft. You think she might be asleep. You ease the brush from her hair, gently tie the silk ribbon she prefers, and slip from the room without a sound. You sleep in your new quarters that night, which aren't much better than your old ones, just closer to the mistress. The bed is stiff, the sheets cold, but the walls are thicker. You don't hear the scullery clatter, only the occasional creak of her footsteps pacing above. You wake to a bell at 5:15. She needs her robe. You don't even sigh. You just rise, pull it from the hook and carry it to her door. It opens before you knock. "You're learning," she says, and turns away. You're not sure if it's praise or a warning. Maybe both. It begins with a glance, not the usual kind, not the glancing past sort you're used to dodging in hallways or on the back stairs. No, this one is longer, heavier, and it lands squarely on you. You feel it before you even see it. That odd tightening between your shoulders, the way your skin suddenly itches like it's been brushed with static. You look up from the decanter you're polishing in the drawing room, and there he is, Lord Melton. Standing by the fireplace, glass in hand, lips curled slightly, not into a smile exactly, but something cousin to it. You look away immediately, back down at the silver, but the damage is done. You've been seen. From then on it's subtle. He doesn't speak to you more than he should, doesn't linger longer than is respectable. But something's changed. You notice it in the way he enters a room and lets his gaze slide over the other servants before settling briefly, too briefly, on you. You notice it when he corrects your posture during dinner service, not with words, but with a look, his eyes flicking to your wrist as if to remind you where your hands belong. You tell yourself you're imagining it. Paranoia. Fatigue. But then one day, he passes you in the corridor near the conservatory. There's no one else around. You press yourself against the wall, as custom dictates, eyes low. He walks slowly, stops, says, "Good girl," in a voice smooth as polished marble, then continues on without another word. Your skin crawls. You say nothing. You're the lady's maid now. You have privileges. Barely. But this isn't one of them. You've heard the stories whispered through the servants' hall, told in bits and pieces with eyes wide and voices hushed. About the housemaid at Eton Hall who had to leave. About the butler who kept secrets for a price. About the cook's niece who ran off in the night and was never spoken of again. Everyone below stairs knows. When the master's eye lingers too long, you disappear, one way or another. Still, you try to carry on. You perform your duties with even more care. You avoid rooms where he might be alone. You start taking longer routes through the house, circling away from corridors that feel too quiet. But it's exhausting. You're always watching, always listening, always calculating the risk of each doorway. Then one evening, after dressing Lady Melton for dinner, you return to your room to find a parcel on your bed, wrapped in brown paper and tied with blue ribbon. No note. Inside, a pair of silk stockings. Fine, new, not the sort a servant could afford, not even a lady's maid. Your stomach turns. You don't touch them. You wrap them back up, tie the ribbon, and place the parcel in the back of your wardrobe. You'll decide what to do with them later. Burn them, maybe. Or better, return them to the drawer in his study when no one's watching. But of course, someone's always watching. Historical fact. Female servants in Edwardian households were often vulnerable to exploitation by the men of the house. There were few protections, and even fewer repercussions for those who abused their positions. Dismissal and silence were the standard outcomes, especially when a pregnancy followed. Quirky fact, some ladies' maids developed methods of self-protection, such as using hairpins arranged in defensive formations when dressing, or slipping bell cords into their gowns so they could yank for help if cornered. One maid reportedly kept a button hook sharpened to a point tucked inside her garter. There's a fierce academic debate around agency and resistance in these situations. Some historians emphasise the powerlessness of lower-class women, caught in systems designed to silence them. Others argue that subtle defiance, coded speech, refusal, escape was a form of strength, even when consequences were dire. You think of Jane and the way her jaw tenses when she hears raised voices. You think of Alice, too new to know what's creeping toward her, and you wonder how many have walked these corridors with the same weight pressing on their spines. The next time Lord Melton speaks to you is at the foot of the main staircase. You're carrying fresh linens, heading toward Lady Melton's dressing room. He steps in front of you suddenly, not touching you, never touching, but too close. Is she behaving? He asks casually, meaning his wife. You hesitate. Yes, my lord. He smiles. Not too difficult, I hope. No, my lord. Another pause. You can hear your heartbeat in your ears. Good girl, he says again, then steps aside. You climb the stairs as fast as dignity allows. Your hands shake the whole way. That night you speak to no one, not even Jane. You just sit on your bed with the wrapped parcel in your lap, willing your breath to stay even. The candle burns low. The silence is thick. You think about running. But where would you go? With what money? You have no references that would follow you, no letters of protection, no family nearby. No one upstairs would vouch for you, and downstairs. They'd all heard the stories, but they'd never say them aloud. You wake in the early hours to the sound of something soft, a knock. 3 quick raps on the door. You don't answer. After a long moment, it's gone. You wait until dawn before opening it. Nothing. No one. But at your feet, another parcel. Smaller. This time you don't even open it. You pick it up, walk straight to the scullery and throw it in the fire. The ribbon burns slowly. The paper curls. You watch until there's nothing left but ash. Then you turn back to the stairs, straighten your apron, and climb. If he wants a reaction, he won't get one. You've learnt to disappear without ever leaving the room. The letter comes tucked in the folds of a freshly laundered underskirt. You nearly miss it. Just a corner of cream envelope peeking from between the pleats as you smooth the linen across Lady Melton's chaise. Your first thought is that it's hers misplaced. Your second thought, as you see your name in careful script across the front, is that someone has made a mistake. No one writes to you, not anymore. You slip it into your apron pocket and continue with your work, heart ticking faster than it should. You keep your hand steady as you finish pressing the ribbon, adjust the hem and tidy the dressing table. Lady Melton isn't expected back for another hour. That gives you time. When you finally duck into the corridor and find a quiet corner behind the dumbwaiter, you open it. The handwriting is familiar. It's from your brother. You haven't heard from him in 2 years. He writes that he's in London now, working in a printer's shop on Fleet Street, learning fast, saving money. He says he heard from someone back in your old village that you're in service at a grand house. He doesn't know the name, just that it's somewhere near Reading, and posh as anything. He writes like he always has, with optimism too big for the page. Then the part that stops your breath. If you ever want to leave, come to me. I've got a room, a spare bed, and no one will ask who you were before. You read the line again, and again. It's the kind of offer that sounds like a window cracking open after years of stale air. You don't cry, not immediately, but something loosens inside you, like a thread tugs gently free. The idea of leaving has always been distant, abstract, a thing you sometimes imagine while polishing silver, only to shove it away like dust beneath a rug. But here it is, in ink. A real thing, a place. You tuck the letter into your bodice, close to your skin. It's warm from your hands by the time you climb back up to Lady Melton's rooms, a little lighter on your feet, even if nothing has changed. Yet. Except things have changed. Lady Sybil is still in the house. She's taken to wandering at night, leaving half-drunk glasses of sherry on the windowsills and humming opera in the bath at odd hours. You're summoned to her room twice in one day, to repair a torn hem, and then again to deliver a book she insists no one else can touch. She eyes you the entire time, like she knows something you haven't said aloud yet. As you set the book on her writing desk, she speaks, cool and deliberate. You know, I left once, she says, got halfway to Rome, lived for a year without a corset, woke up when I liked, ate fruit with my fingers. You say nothing. She watches you for a moment. It was glorious. Terribly lonely, but glorious. You nod, not sure if she expects an answer. She lifts her glass. "Don't wait too long," she says. "You get used to gilded cages." Then she turns back to her book and you leave. Downstairs, the house feels even more restless than usual. Jane is still tense, ever since Thomas vanished. The other maids give her a wide berth, not out of blame, but because sadness is contagious here, and no one wants to catch it. Alice is quieter too, though she's tougher now. You see it in her posture, the way she moves with fewer flinches. That night, after lights out, Jane slips into your room without knocking. You're already sitting up, letter in hand, reading it again. She sits beside you, eyes on the envelope. "You're going," she says. You hesitate. "I'm thinking." She nods once. "You should. I'd have to give notice." "No, you wouldn't." You both know that's true. Giving notice is for people who expect a reference, who care what the family thinks, who plan to stay in the same circle of service for the rest of their lives. You might be done. Jane leans back on the bed, stares at the ceiling. "If you leave, don't forget us." "I won't." "Even Mrs. Phelps?" You smile. "Especially her. Who else would chase me through dreams with a clipboard?" She chuckles softly. "Historical fact. Many servants left service without formal notice, especially if they feared retaliation, blacklisting or scandal. Some fled bad situations in the middle of the night, often with only a small bag and whatever wages they could carry. London, with its sprawling anonymity and constant churn of workers, was a common refuge. Quirky fact. Some ex-servants started entirely new lives under assumed names. A few women who fled large households reinvented themselves as dressmakers, boarding house managers, even actresses, careers that gave them freedom, though not always stability. One former parlour maid became a fortune teller in Soho, claiming her visions came from years of listening through doors. There's a divide in scholarship on whether letters like these, offers from family or friends, truly change lives, or simply offered false hope. Some believe they provided a real exit, while others suggest the pull of familiarity, fear or duty kept most servants from ever acting on them. You're not sure which side you're on yet. The next morning you dress Lady Melton without error. She's in a mood and says nothing beyond her usual clipped instructions, but just as you go to leave the room, she pauses. "Do you have people?" she asks suddenly. You blink. "Ma'am?" "Outside. Family? Somewhere?" "Yes, ma'am." She looks at her reflection in the mirror, as if your answer confirms something. "Good," she says. "You'll need them when you're done with all this." Then she turns away, already lost in her own thoughts. The moment sits in your chest all day. You don't tell anyone else about the letter. You just go about your duties, folding linen, arranging perfumes, refilling ink pots and lighting fires, one task after another. But something inside you has already shifted. You are no longer waiting for a chance. You're counting days. It's just after dawn when you make your decision. You're standing in the butler's pantry, surrounded by polished silver and the faint scent of pipe tobacco, staring at the list of morning duties tacked to the wall. Your name is there, same as ever, in small careful script beneath the heading, "Personal Service, Lady Melton." But the moment your eyes find it, you feel it, that now familiar twist in your chest. The shift, not fear, not duty, just done. You reach for the list with trembling fingers. You don't rip it down, you don't deface it, you simply stare long enough for it to stop meaning anything. Then you turn around. The rest of the house is still asleep. Upstairs, the family lies cocooned in layers of feather down and entitlement. Downstairs, the scullery girl is scrubbing her way toward the first injury of the day. Jane is probably still half dreaming, curled in a too-short bed with a blanket that smells faintly of starch. Even Mrs. Phelps won't be checking the upper corridor for at least another 15 minutes. You have a window, and so you go, not in a rush, you're not fleeing, you're not going to give them the satisfaction of saying she ran. No, this is calm, precise. You return to your room, close the door, and change into the plainest dress you own. The grey one with the patch beneath the hem, the one you arrived in. You pack only what you need. 2 handkerchiefs, your coin purse, a biscuit wrapped in paper, and the letter. You slide it back into your pocket, the crease worn soft from being read too many times. The corridor is silent as you pass through it. You take the servants' staircase, familiar, crooked, the steps worn into shallow dips by 1,000 feet before yours. Every creak feels amplified, but no one stirs. You keep walking. Out the back entrance, past the sheds and the crooked garden gate. The air is damp with the morning, fog still clinging low over the hedges. Your breath clouds in front of you. You walk fast but steady, each step carried by something deeper than courage. You're not brave, you're simply finished. You take the road that leads into the village, boots crunching over gravel. You keep your head down, not hiding, just focused. The trees lean in on either side of the lane, as if to whisper encouragement. The sky brightens slowly. When you reach the edge of the village, you turn once, just once. The house is barely visible from here, its turrets and chimneys poking above the trees like something imagined. Already it feels smaller, distant, like a place from a dream. You turn back and keep walking. Historical fact, it was not unheard of for servants, particularly women, to walk away from their posts without notice, especially in households where abuse, fear or exhaustion became unbearable. Though the social and economic risks were high, those who left often did so at dawn or late at night, hoping to reach a relative, friend or train station before anyone noticed their absence. Quirky fact, some servants who left without notice would mail back uniforms days later with short notes, sometimes polite, sometimes not. One such letter read, "I thank you for your sour soup and cold stares. I am now a waitress and can breathe freely." There's long been scholarly discussion about what it meant for a servant to leave through the front door. Metaphorically, it suggests reclaiming power, refusing to sneak away, to be hidden, to be sentenced. But in real terms, few ever got the chance. Most who left did so through kitchens and courtyards, quietly, anonymously. Still, there's strength in the decision itself, not in how you leave, but that you do. You reach the train station by mid-morning. The porter gives you a once-over and doesn't ask questions. You buy a single ticket to London. It costs more than you'd like, but less than your future. You sit by the window as the countryside rolls by. Fields blur into hedgerows, hedgerows into houses, until all that's left is smoke and brick and noise. London smells different, like ink and coal and hope. At the station you walk with the crowd, no one looks at you. That's the best part. You're no one here, just another girl with a pass tucked in her pocket. You find your brother's shop by asking directions 3 times. It's not grand. Just a corner storefront with fading gold paint on the window. Ye olde paperco. The bell above the door rings as you step inside. He's at the counter, sleeves rolled up, ink smudged on his fingers. He looks up, and for a second doesn't recognise you. Then he smiles, and the world feels manageable again. You don't cry, not yet. That'll come later. For now, you simply step forward and say the words you've been holding in your throat for years. I'm ready. He nods, no questions, just picks up a spare key from the counter and presses it into your palm. There's a room upstairs, he says. Hot water's on, you're home. You exhale for the first time in days. Not because everything will be perfect, but because for once you're not someone else's shadow, you're yours. So here you are, not in an apron, not in stiff shoes or a half-lit corridor or somewhere scrubbing soot from a family crest. You're in a second-floor room above a printer's shop in a neighbourhood that smells like bread and steam, where footsteps on the stair mean company, not orders. There's a kettle hissing softly on the stove and a threadbare chair beside the window that might just become your favourite spot in the world. No bells, no polished brass, no tightly choreographed ballet of duty. Just quiet. Your brother's gone downstairs to open the shop. He left a half loaf of bread and a wedge of cheese on the table, with a scribbled note. Eat something, will you? You're not still working for ghosts. You smile when you read it. Not a wide grin, just the sort of smile that comes from knowing you are seen, that you're not invisible anymore. It's strange, this life without structure. You wake when you choose. You brush your hair for yourself. You sit with your own thoughts and no longer need to count silver or tread silently past locked doors. At first, the silence itches. You're so used to bells and footsteps that you find yourself listening for them out of habit. But then the silence becomes something else. Peace. Or maybe possibility. You help in the shop when you can. Folding pamphlets, tying bundles with twine, delivering leaflets to nearby cafes. No one calls you girl. No one checks your posture. You're not the back of someone's story, you are your own sentence. Some nights you think about the house, not with longing, never that, but with a kind of measured distance, like a chapter closed carefully, his edges smoothed down by time. You wonder if Alice made it, if Jane ever left, if Lady Sybil walked out the front door like you imagined she might. You think of Mrs. Phelps, still storming the corridors like a general in a starched uniform, clipboard in hand. You imagine the silence that must have followed when they found your bed empty. You still keep the letter, the one that offered you escape. It's folded in the drawer beside your bed, next to a spool of thread, a button hook, and the stub of a pencil you've started using to write your own letters, ones that aren't apologies or orders. You write about the market smells, the clatter of type blocks, the way the sun looks when it cuts across the rooftops in the morning. You write things that belong only to you, and slowly you begin to see your reflection again. Not the version in the hallway mirror, tight-laced and silent. Not the girl measured by how well she polished silver or pressed lace or vanished into rooms without being noticed. But someone fuller, someone breathing deeper. You've stepped out of the story that was written for you, and into the one you're writing yourself. It's not all easy. You still flinch at unexpected footsteps. You still wake some nights thinking you've overslept and will be docked a day's pay. But then you see the cracked ceiling, the familiar kettle, the smear of ink on your wrist, and remember that the world has changed. You've changed, and you're not going back. Not ever. So if you're listening to this, curled beneath the covers with your fan humming and the lights low, imagine it. Imagine being free of bells and corsets and lords who smile too long. Imagine walking out the back gate not as a servant escaping, but as a person choosing. Because you're allowed to choose. You always were, even if no one told you. Sleep well tonight, wherever you are. And remember, you don't have to serve forever. The door's unlocked, the street's waiting, and morning is coming.